Keep doing it. The dead speak. A secret message transmission from the First Order says that this is beyond the silver screen. And I am one of your co-hosts, Oleg Kaitara.
I can't keep going.
What's your name?
What's your name?
I'm Alex.
Full last name.
Johnson. I mean Charlie. Fuck.
You're
Palpatine.
Skywalker.
oh, there we go.
I'm Andrew Skywalker.
Oh, I'm Einish. Chad Shindre.
Okay.
Why have we done this?
For laughs.
That's what Disney said after making the Rise of Skywalker.
No,
they
I think they
Yeah.
patted their pockets.
No,
I think I know.
They sat back on their
Check their bank account. They said, well,
$1 billion.
seems to have worked out fine.
Cash, and they're like, whatever.
I don't see a problem here.
I think we should not even bother looking at the trilogy as a whole at this point.
Let's just
and
dive into
just
it.
go straight
Let's
into
fucking
Force.
dive into it.
Let's just go straight into Force Awakens.
Well, I think we need to establish a ground rule real quick.
Okay.
Let us make a fucking point. Sorry.
The ground rule is it's a question.
Did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
It's a I was saying you can tell I watch a bunch of British shows too because I use the C word.
You also said it with like a British tone.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's the only way you can say that. It's British or Australian, or else you just don't say it.
Else you're a
Like,
total ass.
Yeah.
Did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
But the ground rule is basically a question of how we're going to be addressing these. Are we saying that they need? Are we going to look at them as sequel movies, like a sequel to what came before them, and so they need to carry on what they saw in that, or are we going to say they're individual movies?
I think both are fair. It's just you have to make that distinction when you are like
Talking
saying
about it,
shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it out there.
I think if you're wearing separate points and you're saying like, well, this over here, it's you have to see it as a single movie. But then if over here the justification is, well, it is a sequel.
Let's just put out I'll put out that I mostly look at movies as individual movies just as a matter of like my personal philosophy on seeing them, but just as a little precursor to how I feel I think for example, I think The Last Jedi is a pretty good movie and a really bad Star Wars movie, just to give that sense of where I'm coming from on things.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will have to say that when you're talking about the sequel trilogy, since it is a trilogy and it is the sequel trilogy, it's important to talk about it in relation to the original trilogy.
Right. Yes.
But at the same time, with the way it turned out, you really can't not analyze those movies for what they are, because the people who made those movies might as well just strangle each other.
This trilogy functions as well as a car with two wheels.
That's called a motorcycle.
Yeah, that is called a motorcycle.
No. I'm saying he's saying there's one on the driver's side and one in the rear passenger way. That's what he's saying. Any shift at all just causes it to grind on the street.
I mean, that is a good metaphor then.
It really is.
Yeah.
This runs about as well as a rickshaw.
Rickshaws run surprisingly well, I will say.
Okay, let's not argue about that at least.
If anything, the original trilogy is like a rickshaw. It runs
Christ.
surprisingly well. Continue.
Let's.
This
That's
holds
a
up.
horrible metaphor for every reason.
The sequel trilogy holds together about as well as the Tesla car's new window, or the new Tesla car's window.
Amazing. Everything you just said is wrong.
Every fucking word of it.
Wait, let me pull out a metaphor from the last podcast. It's like it dances with itself. It dips its toe in the water.
Yeah.
I really like that metaphor.
I actually like that metaphor.
I like
I know, and now I'm
dips its toe
gonna
in the
run it
water.
into the ground.
Let's not run it into the
I feel
ground.
like you're gonna make it worse by doing that.
Oh, that's the point.
Oh.
Okay, who wants to give a recap on the Force
I've got it written
Awakens?
down.
Okay, Alex is.
Yeah, Alex should do
No,
this.
I have it written
No,
down.
I think Alex should really not do any
All
of the
right.
recaps, and I'm saying that as somebody who's on the same team as Alex for The Force Awakens.
Yeah, let's
Because
dive into this
no.
Joker.
No, your
notebook of
recaps-
notes.
I have it written down.
Your recaps are gonna be biased as fuck.
No, it's literally us.
Wait, Alex,
scene
why
for
is your
scene.
description of Last Jedi just fucking porgs?
Yeah, no, there's no blackouts. I do have no. Porce
Okay,
isn't
but
even
like
in
I'm
it.
specifically
Here.
gonna ask you
No.
for any movie, even this one where I'm on your side.
Yeah.
Be when you're
Yeah.
presenting the plot, neutral. No fucking positive statements. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. Poe gets the map and gives it to BB-8. Poe is captured. Rey randomly runs into BB-8. Finn.
Heard of a comma?
Finn free. I mean, these are all separate things.
He's doing great.
Finn frees Poe and runs. She goes back to Jakku and Poe dies. Finn runs into BB-8 and Rey. They find the Falcon. Solo finds them. There's a side story thing with the monster.
Raftar.
Yep.
No, not the Raftar. What is it?
Whatever it is.
What, I don't
The
I can't
tentacle
remember
thing.
those things.
Kanji Club.
They go to Maz Kanata. Rey gets a lightsaber. First Order shows up. Ren takes Rey. Han and Finn go to the Rebels. Rey interrogation. Rey escapes. Finn and Han go to Death Star. Or no, to the Star Destroyer, sorry. Ren and Solo scene. The final fight. They blow up the planet. And R2 wakes up.
And Rey goes to the
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she goes to that. Yeah. Okay, so before we start,
Positions?
we should voice our positions on this film. Personally, I don't think it's like the worst thing ever, but I do think like the net average is it's pretty bad.
They are Raftars. I'd like to throw that out there.
Okay, thank
That
you.
is what they are called.
Yeah, okay.
Very nice.
So my position is of the three sequels, it's probably the best, but it's also a horrible movie. And it's one of my Trojan horse movies, the ones that sneaks by you, making you think it's good, and then you realize afterwards, oh, that was flaming dog shit.
If I remember properly, I went in 2015. We went to the movies.
We went to it together.
Yeah.
You liked it, and I really did not.
Yeah, I've had this case like both times I've seen the movie after a long time where like I really liked it and I'm like, man, I really liked it, and then the more I think about it or on repeat viewings, I'm like, I like this less and less, but I don't think it's a bad movie because of like on the technical aspects, it is very well made, but the story and sort of the lack of character development for many of the characters, not all, for many of the characters, really holds it back from being like more than just an okay movie for me. So
Yeah. So when I first saw it, I really didn't like it, like at all, really. I've seen it, I think 3 or 4 times now, and every single time I watch it, it gets better, which is really kind of crazy, because that's normally not how movies work for me. It's like every time I watch a movie, I find more to nitpick and pull it apart, even the movies I love to death. But I don't know, The Force Awakens to me, I think it's actually really good. It's easily I think it's not easily, but certainly the best of the sequel trilogy movies we have. It is a derivative kind of ripoff of Star Wars New Hope, and that's like very much important to keep in mind. Although I will say the one thing that really separates it is that I think its character development is better, and that's probably a really hot take. And I will defend it.
Yeah.
I think the character development in this movie is better than the Star Wars version of here's characters that are quirky but have no actual like development beyond like what they're doing, like just kind of like throw them out there. It's like here's this character, they're going to do the same thing consistently over and over again for an entire film. The Force Awakens is here's people with backstories, here's people with having to go through journeys, and it's not like someone is holding their hand the whole way through. Here's people actually having to do it for themselves. I think it's a really good film in general.
all those arcs were given a very satisfying conclusion.
Well, I will say, and that's fair to point out that I am definitely looking at Force Awakens as an individual film because any hopes that it has going forward were pretty much dashed at some point along the lines. But as it stood on its own, I think it's perfectly fine.
Okay, now that the intro statements are out of the way, I suggest that the way we handle these movies is that we always let like the negative side, like the people who dislike the movie, drive the conversation, so that they can bring up something they disagree with or dislike, and then like the other side can address that or bring something up as a.
Yeah, I think that's great.
He's like, on an unrelated note, when we get to Last Jedi, I think we should reverse that. And
I mean, you are the person who.
No, I think I'm
he's
down
saying
to
that-
keep it that
I'm
way.
saying because you would be on the side of protecting Last Jedi.
Correct, and I would.
I was making a joke. Never mind.
Oh, you were speaking
Yeah.
from my point of view.
Yeah,
I see.
just
Funny.
as a side note.
Funny joke.
It was funny.
It was before I had to explain
Okay,
it.
and,
I laughed on the inside.
yeah.
You laughed.
Right down here. If you
I-
can't tell, I'm pointing very, very deep into my chest.
The cackles of your heart.
Yes.
I would ask to go first because I specifically have something to say about not your intro statement, but like something.
Something to say about
you as a
you.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's more of a personal insult.
Yeah, I'm gonna. He's gonna do the presidential route and attack the person, not the policy.
Yeah. First, he's going to say, well, watch me say the C word without a British accent.
With a Russian one.
Are we cutting that out or no?
No.
No,
So I think that
No, we are
you
not.
are a piece of shit.
that's actually fair. Like,
Wow, they agree.
yeah, I do too. Wow.
Okay.
Yes, and?
Okay, for real though, I am going to like the thing that, and you said it yourself. You think it's a hot take, and I also think it's a hot take. Character arcs
Yeah.
in The Force Awakens are, I think,
One might say steaming.
yeah, I personally think they're practically almost non-existent, and I'm going to quickly touch on every one of them. So Rey doesn't really have much of an arc.
Mhm.
It's more of a character like up, straight line up. It's not really an arc because like she just starts off and she never like there's no real challenge in this movie that she has to overcome. And while it is true that that was sort of the case for Luke Skywalker in A New Hope.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't
I-
agree.
I-
I don't think Rey doesn't have a challenge to overcome either, but we'll get to that.
She has a challenge.
Yeah,
She has
it's
a
not
lot of them actually.
not as
but-
strong as Luke's, I would say.
Like
but
I do
it
think
is
Luke
a-
is considerably stronger, and I would say that like Rey.
as a character.
Oh,
as a character.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I was
In a
like,
fight.
Yeah, no, Rey is practically a god, but like,
She's way too overpowered. I'm not gonna shy away from that.
yeah, I will have to say that like, she also like, in like most of my issues come from her powers being unexplained because the way the Force Awakens is built.
Explain it. Episode 9.
God damn it! The way they built Episode 7 is that her powers are really central to her character arc, and they just don't really explain it. And her character is just kind of bland, like blander even than Luke Skywalker in Episode 4, who was already bland.
If
Yeah,
you-
Luke
very
Skywalker
bland
is
character.
Wonder Bread.
if you had to
essentially.
describe Rey's,
She's bunny bread.
if you had to describe Rey's personality, how would you describe it?
I would say that she's I would say that she's definitely like resilient. Is the first word that comes to mind. I mean, like I'm not going to lie. The first word that comes to mind for me for Rey is wooden. That's mostly based. That's mostly based on Daisy Ridley's performance. Although I would say Luke Skywalker's also very
Well,
wooden. So
yeah,
I'm
I
not
would
gonna
agree with
play-
that.
Well, at least in the
Only
first
in
one.
Episode 4,
Yeah.
though.
5 and
Later
6
on,
he
he's
gets
pretty
better.
great.
Also, I think Rey gets better.
There's
in episode 8.
a
She
very
does,
large
she
amount of
does.
emotion
And
that
then
gets
nine
shown.
We'll touch
Yeah,
on that.
a lot
Let's,
later.
like at this
Yeah.
point, I don't think we should be mixing.
True.
I'd say resilient is one. I think she's very doubtful. Like she has an air of confidence, but she's always consistently like doubting not only like herself but her worth and her personal stakes, which I think makes her kind of like you can see it throughout the film. Like no matter like how good she does in a situation, she always keeps feeling like she's not good enough, and you can really I think it comes out decently well.
I
Not
can
the
see it.
not the best, but I blame the writers more for that than anything. But yeah, I mean, I'd say that, and I think for her, like a big thing about The Force Awakens is that I think in retrospect it gets worse because these arcs were not built up to start and end in one film in the way Star Wars was, because it was more of a standalone thing. These arcs were meant to be built up to be continued, and like, yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that a lot of them were not continued well at all. Some of them did fine, but whatever. So
Some of Ben did fine.
I will say like as an individual film, it kind of sucks that like they don't have like definitive starts and ends. But this movie was conceived as the beginning of 2 more films to build on the arc. So like what you said about how like they start and then go up but don't really come back down and finish, I actually don't think that's an issue.
For Rey, it might not be an issue, but this is
Well,
where
wait,
like
I was gonna say.
sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So her as a character, you could only resilient and doubtful.
Well, I would say
that
throw
is
in,
the entirety of
throw
the
in
character.
naive. I think
Naive is what I came up
Doubtful's
with.
different than naive.
It's
way
just
different.
the unsureness.
No, that's not even what naive means.
Well, right, no, I know. Naive is like innocent and.
It's more like you take everything at face value. You're innocent. Like,
I'm an English person.
Yeah. Well, apparently, yeah.
Which in fairness is just about the same exact words that I would use to describe Luke Skywalker.
Which comes back to the point
Which comes back to the point that
this
the
is a
movie's
ripoff.
very derivative.
Yeah.
You know?
But just as we were saying that Luke Skywalker is a somewhat flat character in Episode 4, Rey is similarly a flat in character lacking depth.
Yeah.
In this.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not saying the character development in this film is great
or good
or even really. I'm saying it's a bit better than in Star Wars where you just have quirks, and like in this one at least you can see some form of like an arc being built up for more than just one or two people. You can actually see it for a lot of different characters.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would say, how would you describe then Finn?
Finn
is easy to describe.
I was gonna say Finn's actually one of the easier ones.
I
It's
do
a-
think
Poe.
Even
He's in it for
well,
3
okay, yeah,
minutes?
we'll get back to that.
Poe sucks. In this movie,
I would
he's
say the main
awful.
issue with
He's
Finn
attractive. I'll give him that.
is that like when you talk about Finn, his character arc in the movie makes no goddamn sense.
I want just real quick.
I think
how would you
Okay, I'll
describe
come back
Finn?
to that.
Yeah,
Like let him
Finn.
do his thing.
Describe Finn.
So Finn is someone who has been forcibly taken and put into the First Order.
As a person.
As
like the personality
Adjective,
traits.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, as a person, he's a man. I mean, he's very similar to Rey, which I think is why their friendship works. But he's a man who, like, very much is like opposed to evil in the world, but doesn't feel strong enough to fight it on his own. And so he's a man who always like is trying to run away, but then keeps realizing that like eventually he can't, and he has to turn around and do it himself.
I think confused could also be
Okay.
one because he's like once like the Force Awakens.
And don't get me wrong, even even in the retrospect of the entire sequel trilogy, the arc of Finn is completed within the first half of the Force Awakens, and then just dragged on.
Would you say then that Finn is also a flat, like lacking depth character?
I think he's definitely more interesting than Rey, only because
it's a more
he has
interesting setup, I'd say.
If only because he goes back and forth so much more.
I think it's a poor execution of an interesting setup.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I do like about like at least these two, and especially when Han Solo enters the picture, which I kind of missed from the originals, is just how charismatic like the main cast is. Because I feel like
Except for maybe Daisy Ridley.
Maybe Daisy Ridley, but like John Boyega is just oozing charisma. Honestly,
And look, you can play a drinking game where it's take a shot every time she closes her mouth throughout the movie, and
you would stay sober.
Yeah, you would stay sober.
But it's like I like the fact that the main
four times she closes her mouth.
The main cast actually have like especially when it's like I also really like what Daisy Ridley and like John Boyega's characters like when they interact because it's kind of cute. I'm like, oh, this is adorable. They actually like kind of have this like budding friendship, maybe romance that never gets touched on. That like goes on, and you're like, okay.
It gets touched on in John Boyega's like Twitter.
John Boyega's Twitter is fire.
Dude,
for anyone
John
who has
Boyega,
go for it.
He has some
if nothing
balls
else
in there.
good came out of the sequel trilogy, just John Boyega post Star Wars is.
Oh God,
it is gold.
He's so done with this shit.
But it's very nice to see like people
that's brilliant.
It's very nice to see like at least characters that have some sort of camaraderie compared to the like empty wasteland that was the prequels.
That is true.
The chemistry in The Force Awakens, I think, is quite strong. We haven't touched yet on Kylo Ren, who, for my money, is the best villain in Star Wars.
He might be
Darth Vader.
Well, yeah, okay.
But without
I
the
will
rise
say
of
Episode
Skywalker,
9 really drove a hole in that.
Yeah.
I think the second half of Episode 8 kind of drives a hole in it too. But
No,
at least,
Episode
but at least
we'll
in
get
Force,
to that. We'll get
at
to
least
that.
at least in
keep it
Force
pure?
Awakens, he's a very strong character. He's a
very interesting.
He is he's very interesting. It's the first. It's really kind of the first time in Star Wars you ever see the villain actually struggle between the light side and the dark side, like internally, not just with
Episode 2 and 3.
not just with again.
No,
not
I mean
with,
he killed the women and the children
Children,
too.
I'm like, look, okay. Here's the thing about that though, is that like, you can say that like it's an internal struggle, but literally like everything that happens with Anakin is just other people telling him to do something, and then he does it, and he's like, I shouldn't have done that, or he does it, and he's like, that felt good, and then someone tells him to do something bad again. Kylo Ren is pretty much the only villain in Star Wars who actually like has an internal conflict of, am I doing the right thing or am I not, without just like following reactively to what other people tell them to do.
I will agree with you that Kylo Ren is. I mean, I will say I think, and I don't think anybody will disagree on this, Kylo Ren is the best new character in the sequel trilogy.
Yes, absolutely.
But like,
Well, it's Kanata.
Possibly the only good character.
No, I don't think
and since we decided that we let the negative side drive this conversation, I will have to put him in the later folder for like another second, because I do want to come back to Finn and John Boyega.
Mm-hmm.
Because specifically, you said that you think The Force Awakens has solid build-up in terms of character arcs, and specifically when it comes to Finn, I just think it's such a hot mess that, like, if we look at his character arc from the beginning, like, so his whole turning point in the beginning that like starts off his character arc is that one of the stormtroopers he knew dies, like one of his friends, and he like puts his hand on it, like the bloody hand mark on the helmet. And then so like essentially his arc from there is killing stormtroopers, and like what the fuck are you doing with this character?
Honestly, yeah, it was very much, they set it up for, okay, we're going to humanize the stormtroopers and introduce depth to that, and then they immediately said, oh wait, we need someone to shoot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if they dropped the ball
if
big time.
Poe
with that.
shot the stormtroopers, it would have been fine, I guess, because he's not really shooting them.
No, there's literally
But-
like Finn
or-
shooting them like
yeah,
Woo!
yeah, he's
We
shooting.
got him!
Or the fact that
Wait, there's still some straggling drinking coffee.
I was fine with him killing like the big generals up in the tower. I was like, okay, fine, he killed. But like the fact that when he was blasting the stormtroopers, I'm like, huh?
Yeah, that was ass.
And then
I had lunch with that
And
guy.
he didn't
Bing,
dwell
bing,
on it. He didn't dwell. Like I could see like in the heat of the moment, he's like, fuck, we gotta get away. But if after he's like,
Yeah, I would be fine with
Shit,
it,
I
but
just
they never
killed
even
my-
address it. He has like that's his whole character arc setup. He has that moment in the beginning, and that's like it.
If he had
That's
done that
literally
out
it.
of necessity to escape and then when you struggled with it, that would have been great.
that would have
It
been
would have
cool.
But
been
no,
good. Yeah.
we got him shooting people and then like basically skipping down the street, covered in blood.
That is
I don't have
literally-
to see the wizard.
That is kind of what
Yeah.
we got there.
Hey Ray,
Butterflies floating around him.
Ray, yeah, Ray, I'm from the Resistance. You have a boyfriend? You know. Yeah.
Yeah, so like, and that's really all the
So
character setup we got.
either Finn is a sociopath, or it's just terrible writing.
So yeah, all of his character setup is that, like, even if we discard the killing stormtroopers part and how they drop the ball on the whole humanizing both sides part because they make it black and white again. Okay,
Yeah.
they drop the ball on that.
That's
They
just
skip that.
J.J. Abrams.
That is
Actually,
J.J.
yeah.
Abrams, in
Ugh.
all fairness, and I don't like
I
his
blame
style of
J.J.
writing.
Abrams for that.
But
Yeah.
like, that's all Finn has. He was a stormtrooper and he regrets it. That's it.
I
It's
really-
the first 15 minutes of the movie.
I really like what they. I know I forgot if you agree with me, Andrew or Oleg, but I said that. I know it's definitely not you, but
Riff.
it was. I like what they did with Han Solo and Leia in this movie.
Yeah, I don't think it was me.
It was
I think it was probably me then.
because I like the fact that like especially when they reunite again and like just a little conversation they have is like you changed your hair and she's like
I know.
no, I know
Imagine.
That would have been great.
that little and then the
Yes, I know.
and then the hug they share where it's like we should have done more for our son and like seeing this couple that was in love now 30 years ago like dealing with this situation, it was kind of heartbreaking. And I like the fact like how Han, he's like, I failed my son, so I kind of just fell back into what I, and this is like, yeah, he just kind of like he fell back into like what he knows best, and I'm like, that seems kind of realistic for his character. If like this big of a situation happened, he's like, I went back to that, Leia went back to that, and we just kind of went along our way. I'm like, oh, and finally we got a good performance from Harrison Ford because in
Yes.
Episode 6.
He did not get it.
He was working
Did
for a
not.
paycheck.
He absolutely. I mean, he
did
was
not
working
care.
for a paycheck in Force Awakens too, but like he what did he get paid like $25 million or something?
He
Like-
definitely was better. Than
Yeah, like they had
He definitely gave a shit.
he had an interview where like the late night show, and I think it might have been like Jimmy Fallon or like Jimmy Kimmel. They're like, did you feel anything like when you put on like what did you get when you put on the Han Solo jacket again? He said, I got paid, like with a blank face. Like he really didn't care, but he still gives a really good performance. And
It is Harrison
And the
Ford,
scene
yeah.
with him and Kylo Ren, like when he yells Ben, like I
That
still
is a
get
solid.
I
fucking
get
scene.
shivers. I'm like, oh my
I
god.
And
love that
I
scene.
think like I will you know, I will very much give J.J. Abrams credit for the fact that, like, he didn't just throw in Han and Leia as fan service.
Right.
They're actual characters in this movie who
Sure.
actually went through traumatic, like, moments in their life,
Mhm.
who, like, both fell back into doing what they used to know best.
Never
now
to
are,
be
like,
again.
Never to be again.
Never
But
to
then,
be good
like,
characters again.
having to deal with,
Episode 9, I think Han Solo was actually kind of great. It
Yeah,
was,
I
like,
will say that
probably
was
the
that
best
was
scene
pretty
in the
much the
movie.
only good scene in Rise of Skywalker
Exactly,
was
yeah.
the scene
Okay,
with Harrison
I
Ford.
also
You
like
didn't
the
like- you
Luke
didn't like
Skywalker
Luke's
one.
involvement?
Yeah, the Luke Skywalker one was also pretty good.
It was okay. I have some problems.
I actually laughed
I mean,
out loud in
yeah.
embarrassment at that scene.
No, the ending of the we'll talk about the
We'll
ending of the
get
scene.
to
The
that.
as he pulls.
Personally, I
That
was
was a little, not a little, that was
That
over
was
the top.
horrible.
I
That
gave
was
a little
way over the top.
shout of glee when he said, like, you should treat the Jedi's tools with more respect. I'm like, ah.
I actually
Sorry,
like that
Ryan.
gag.
We,
Last
we,
Jedi.
I mean, we'll get back
We'll
to
get
that,
back to
but
it.
if we bring this up, I do actually feel like Ryan Johnson's Luke Skywalker by the end of the movie would do the exact same thing, so I didn't have an issue with that.
Yeah, because he learns to accept the fact that he is. Then he was like, I was wrong.
Yeah,
That whole thing.
that is it. Okay, we'll
We'll
get to
get-
that.
we'll
We'll
that.
get to that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, back to Kylo Ren, because I did postpone that. Kylo Ren in episode 7 and 8 overall is fucking awesome, for sure. If episode 9 didn't exist, I would probably second you on the part where
Yeah,
he's
I
my
was-
favorite Star Wars villain. However, and there is a however to me,
Mhm.
when we come to episode 7, I think the way they present the villain in episode 7 is very lackluster.
Yeah.
Because, like, he starts off as a very just badass, intimidating character. Like, his introduction, and I would
Yeah.
say the whole intro scene on Jakku,
It is
Where-
on par with the Vader intro.
yeah, like,
yeah, it is.
it is
really good.
amazing, but
And
that is
then-
kind of the issue. Because they build him up so well that once they, like, reveal they show his face, they make him even look like a boy, which I think is a nice touch.
Mhm.
But,
I
like,
liked it because I was expecting someone scarred up. And
yeah,
hurt.
but that's the issue, is that after that shock reveal, and I think a lot of people took it the wrong way, because, like, I've seen the movie in the theater, like, 2 times, if not 3 times, and people were laughing every time, which
Yeah.
I feel like was not the reaction.
He
they were
looks
going for.
like a chubby kid wearing a Christmas
The
sweater.
turtleneck doesn't
Yeah,
help it,
that
but
his
yeah.
his mother made him wear.
But
just
like,
to
yeah,
look nice for
regardless, like the
relatives.
moment he reveals his face and he starts showing doubt and all that, that's very interesting, and they work very well with that in The Last Jedi. But the Force Awakens as a movie just falls apart because it just doesn't have an antagonist
I was
anymore.
gonna say, I think
yeah,
yeah,
we
he
got
is.
hologram Snoke.
Because
he is-
Snoke is not he is an antagonist in The Last Jedi, yes, not in The Force Awakens.
Kylo Ren is the least imposing or like dangerous villain that we get in the entirety of Star Wars.
That is very false.
In episode
Very
7, yes.
false.
Later on, very
who,
false.
who else is less imposing and threatening?
Count Dooku, General.
Yeah,
Grievous.
literally
Count
any
Dooku,
prequel
Count
game.
Dooku beats them.
He's not intimidating.
Yeah, he really
Well,
is.
okay, but
Really
that's
not.
That's fair.
Or General Grievous, who
when Kylo
runs
Ren
away
shows up
every
in the
fucking
forest
time.
and starts chasing Rey down, and then like Force stops Rey.
Okay, I think that is actually kind of weak.
That scene.
I
I
think
was
it's pretty
actually.
close.
I mean,
I was pretty
It's
worried.
good, but like that still comes. It's not great. It's good, but it comes before the reveal once again.
True,
So
but
that's
it's
back
still
when he's a solid character.
still intimidating, and
Like,
also
Until
I-
they reveal him, he's so cool.
But also
Yeah.
after the reveal, when he's with Han Solo on the bridge, I'm like, this is kind of scary.
That is a
Because
good scene.
It's a very good scene, but like,
Ki-
this is.
But
I'm worried.
the movie doesn't have,
Yeah.
because like the structure of the film up until that moment is built to have an antagonist force,
Mhm.
which disappears after that
Yeah.
reveal.
I will
The
say
stakes
too,
just drop, and they never rise again. For the movie.
Kylo suffers
But the
from
Skywalker.
Kylo
Right.
suffers from something that they all antagonists they need to have some edge over the protagonist that like the protagonist has to overcome to beat them. So Kylo Ren is weaker in force powers than Rey, and he is not as mentally strong as Rey. So like usually you see one of the two. So like for instance, the Joker is not as physically strong or capable as Batman, but he's mentally stronger. And Batman has to find a way to overcome that.
I don't know if I can say mentally strong.
I would agree. I think he definitely is.
Well, I mean, like,
I think
in
it's
the
more of
sense
he's
that,
like crazier and.
I would
more
say he's
willing to
mentally
do-
stronger
yeah.
actually, because Batman is actually very mentally insecure.
Yeah.
He is.
Okay, if you in that.
Yeah.
Kind
I
of,
mean,
I was
the-
thinking more
like-
like he will go to a further length to
I
accomplish.
will say that like Ray fails one major test, which is that every good protagonist since
Has a weakness.
Greek literature has a weakness, and she really doesn't have.
They literally
In this
don't even
movie,
have like
and
something
then
as
episode
stupid
8,
as
she kinda
kryptonite.
does.
She
Yeah.
kind of does, but it's still a
She
problem.
kind of doesn't. I mean, she kind of does here in the sense that like she's always
Episode
trying to like
9.
avoid the fight, but like
I didn't even catch
that's
that.
not
No.
much of.
I didn't see that in the movie. Like,
No.
I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
because I always saw her as doing like even when she like stood up for the droid, like from the beginning, she was doing the right thing,
Yeah.
and she was pretty confident about
Yeah,
it too.
it was always like, I know what the right thing is
Yeah,
going
she
to do,
always-
and I'm going to do it.
In any situation, she was confident
Yeah.
and she knew what to do. Like, be it like piloting the
Yeah.
Millennium Falcon.
From the very beginning, it
standing
was
up for
don't hold my
Finn,
hand.
Which
Yeah.
could work if like I'm
So-
thinking like a character when you said like someone who doesn't change or like knows everything that's right. I thought of Captain America.
Well,
but
that's different.
that's different because he has
that
other
is literally
flaws.
his character flaws.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
he's too unyielding.
But then the thing is about how the world around him is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Then I realize that doesn't.
That's
work.
true. She's no Ned Stark. We'll throw that out there. Like,
She's
she
no
really
Ned
is
Stark,
not.
she's no
So,
Cap. It's
no.
She's a flat, uninteresting character with no flaws.
I stand there too.
And she is the main character of the film.
I think she's flat. I think she's a little interesting because I like her backstory and stuff. But
Which one? What backstory?
the
Her
back-
parents.
Which version?
with her parents. Well, and then the fact of the.
Oh, Palpatine?
Oh
Very
my God.
interesting.
I like the way it resolved in
No.
episode 8.
No.
From a certain
I
point of
really-
view.
I really like how it resolves in episode 8, actually. Like, the way that all that, like... Which, do you guys have anything else more to say about Force Awakens?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'll let him, because I was going to talk about the characters.
All right, they.
I guess you...
Yeah.
I think
Should we
we've kind of got across the characters at this point.
I was gonna ask
main,
if you wanted to add
main,
something
char-
to
main
the
characters
Yeah.
not the best. Supporting characters like Luke or not Luke, like Han and Leia.
Yeah.
I think are and
Have a
and Ren.
good
I
scene.
think are done
Or-
pretty well.
I
They
guess
have
Han
a
gets
lot.
2 good scenes and Leia gets 1,
They
where
have a
she meets
couple.
Han.
They have a couple, but...
And also, I just love, like, Han's feeling when he's back in the ship and he's like, Chewie, we're home. And, like,
Right.
that
I
whole, like,
usually separate, like, when I talk about the sequel trilogy, I often, like, as an econ guy, I separate it into micro writing and macro writing, where macro writing is how you write the story, the plot
Mhm.
twist, the character arcs, and micro writing is just how you write scenes, like the character
Mhm.
dialogue, like the interactions and shit like that. On the level of micro writing, The Force Awakens is actually almost great. Whereas
Yeah,
on
it
the level of
Yeah.
macro writing, like, there is no macro writing. It's non-existent.
I would disagree with that and say that it's actually very weak micro writing too. Like
scene
they-
to scene
they
it works
can't-
well. It's just the whole.
they
doesn't
have
work.
a really big issue too with especially whenever Poe enters the frame is breaks
Yeah.
for comedy.
Yeah, I
Poe
agree
doesn't
with
have a
that.
character arc, but
No,
he's
well,
just
no.
introduced
I'm
for later
saying-
movies.
Poe's
I'm
very,
s- yeah.
Poe is a MacGuffin character.
Yeah.
He exists to propel the plot forward and then fuck off.
And also to make jokes while he's there.
Yeah, that's
And be like, no, it's still a fun Disney movie.
I didn't hate
No,
most
it's
of
not
this
dark.
comedy.
Thanks, Llewyn Davis.
Yeah, I would say,
Your mama joke comes later.
That was-
yeah, JJ's breaks for comedy are easier to stomach, I think, than the Last Jedi ones, but we'll get to those.
I don't
think-
necessarily second that, but
I
your
actually,
mama
I will,
joke
I
was
will
rough.
agree with that.
We'll
but
get to those,
that later.
yeah.
We'll touch
Why does Rey know how to fly a ship?
I had the argument that she
That's
was a
pretty cool.
junker, so she
But
kind
like
of
her doing maneuvers on the Millennium
Yeah.
Falcon.
That no. At first it was like, oh, she's like
Being a
crashing
mechanic doesn't make someone a race car driver.
Yeah.
At first I was like, oh, she's actually like crashing into shit and like running into the sand. But
Better yet,
then she
being a
no,
junker
then
doesn't
when she
make
pulls
someone
off
a
that
race car
impossible
driver.
shot,
Literally impossible
That
maneuver.
was-
Yeah.
dumb. But like when like they were flying, she's like, oh my god, they like run into all this stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, so she doesn't know what she's doing. And then she starts doing this other shit. I'm like, okay, well,
So, it takes 30 years for the legend of for the Jedi to turn it into a legend. Like that would be like
No, that makes no sense.
yeah, that would be like if by now we said, well, World War I was just a legend. The
No, not even
stories
World War- the
actually
fucking
no.
Cold War.
Yeah.
Well,
I've
wait,
heard
wait, wait.
tales of
the
Russia.
Jedi were dead though. Remember, like it was only Luke and his handful of disciples.
Leia was literally the leader. She's still alive in there.
Yeah,
Han
no,
is
that's-
literally a leader. He is still alive in there. The government that had
That they
replaced,
reinstalled
Yeah.
was there at the beginning of the movie.
they
That's
literally
true, yeah.
blew up planets.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the fact I felt nothing and had no idea what happened when all those
Yeah.
planets exploded.
Yeah.
And that
Because
brings up another
It was
major
it was
point.
visually a nice scene.
Visually very.
However,
looks-
it
it
also
looks
makes no
very
sense
good.
that it was visually nice
Also,
because you
that
shouldn't be
brings
able to
up
see
the
the
issue of the title crawl, because straight up from the title crawl,
Yeah.
like what, like in terms of world building, what the fuck is this movie
Yeah,
even
how the
doing?
fuck did
Yeah, so,
the
like,
First Order take
At
over?
least the prequels tried to fit into the overall story, even though they completely failed at doing that,
Yeah,
for sure.
at least they tried.
But
They
like
did try.
here, it's like, yeah, so we're just gonna have the Empire without explaining
Sorry,
how
I'm
it
just
came
reading my
back.
notes.
We're gonna have the rebels, even though they technically are in power and should be stronger. They're still we're gonna call them the resistance. Like, and we're not gonna explain anything either. Just like you like the original trilogy, so like
Yeah, we're gonna substitute explaining how we got here by just making everything
Look
a
fucking
carbon
cool.
copy of the first movie,
Yeah.
and then you'll like fall into place.
yeah, I don't like that.
Here's another one. Why does fucking R2 just wake up at the end?
Because
He
Force-
just
good
wakes
point.
up.
it's a minor nitpick, but it's a fair nitpick.
It's a fair nitpick.
Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Back in the trailer shot, like they revealed the title, The Force Awakens, and the first thing you see in the trailer is fucking scared, like surprised, confused Finn's head popping up from the sand, just The Force Awakens.
Huh? When you said like surprised, I thought surprised Pikachu face.
Yeah, I wish we saw that in.
That would have been better.
Here's another thing. Death Star 3.
Yeah, that's
part of
it's
the-
bad.
It's,
I know.
It's
We,
just,
we all know that's really
it's part
like
of,
an
it's
issue.
part of
Okay,
the,
so
this movie is a
it's
ripoff.
bland.
Yeah.
The only like the best parts of the third act are hands down Ren and Han, and then I think Ren and Rey's fight is very good too. You can really see that like
Well,
that's
don't
like
forget
one of the
Phasma.
only that's one of the only scenes. Phasma sucks. That's one of the only scenes in the movie where you can really see that Rey is kind of inexperienced, and the only reason she doesn't get slaughtered in that fight is because Ren gets too caught up in his anger, and you can actually see that in the choreography. But I agree. Every like in the third act, like all the like dogfight stuff outside the Starkiller base, it's just really boring. It's kind of cool how it gets darker as it goes on, but that's
I think that's
like,
a cool touch. Where like I don't think
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
a
good, I don't
good
think it's a good
technical
fight.
detail.
No,
but
I'd
that's
say
it.
It's a cool
it's-
idea. As the fight goes on, the sun is getting more and more power sucked out, so it just gets darker.
I will say all three of these movies, I think from a technical standpoint, very strong. They
Rise
should
of
be.
Skywalker is not technically
Okay,
strong.
We'll
maybe.
get to that later.
Maybe,
but yeah,
but-
I agree that like even
but
Rise
the
of
writing-
Skywalker I think is technically
The
stronger
writing
than
in
the
all of them
prequels.
are
Well,
fucking
yeah,
awful.
but that's honestly
I
not.
think the gold standard. It was like because Force Awakens and Last Jedi are so technically like almost perfect.
Yeah.
Almost.
I
Rise
would
of
say that about
Skywalker
The
is
Last
like
Jedi.
Rise of Skywalker is like slightly above average for technical,
Yeah.
because there's some bad set design and
Yeah.
effects and stuff.
Yeah, and coming back to world building, like I feel like this movie just never bothers to take time with world
No.
building. A good example of that is something like
Hello, I'm
Maz-
J.J. Abrams.
Like yeah, I bring this up a lot, but fucking like Maz Kanata,
Yeah.
because like in the original trilogy they didn't give you like a full backstory for everything, but like Jabba the Hutt, he runs a syndicate, he runs a cartel. Cool, I know who he is.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is Maz Kanata? Does she run a bar? Is she a collector? Is she a president? Because like she's kind of a junk collector too, but
You know,
she has a castle
she's
and a
actually-
giant statue of herself.
She's actually confirmed to be force sensitive too.
Yeah, who the fuck is Maz
Are you
Kanata?
serious?
A good question
Is
for another
everyone
time.
force sensitive?
Well, you know, as we saw with Broom Boy, yes.
Okay, I like the Broom Boy force sensitive touch actually.
It's fine.
I like that.
It's
Broom,
fine.
literally
I don't love
everybody.
it. It's fine.
Finn is force sensitive. Ray is force sensitive. I wouldn't be surprised if Poe's fucking force sensitive.
No, but
The
if
Force
everybody
fucking
is.
awakened, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Force
evidently.
Awakened in everyone.
The Force,
It's
the
like, wait, have
Force
you guys-
Awakened.
Have you guys seen?
everybody.
You've seen Legend of Korra season 3?
I wish
Yeah.
Cthulhu
I
would be
fucking
in
love
it.
Legend of Korra.
We should do an Avatar podcast some way. Anyways,
Well,
anyway.
that's a tease for another time.
Yeah.
a story for another time.
Yeah, that's literally what the explanation to Maz Kanata shit. Yeah,
Also,
Yeah.
Knights of Ren.
watch the spin-off.
Hey, they're in episode 9 and they were.
Yeah,
They were
like
worth
people
it.
were saying they wanted them. They got him.
Yeah,
Did you like it?
No, I think
I started laughing because I jabbed my brother. I'm like, watch, how many times are the Knights of Ren gonna show up to bookend a scene, and they do nothing.
dude, the Knights of Ren.
Dude, that's the Knights.
The Knights-
The Knights of Ren.
the Knights of
That's
Ren-
The Knights of Ren. He's like, stop it. I hate this movie.
The Knights of Ren, I think, are a great example of like both what I think is one of the film's greatest weaknesses, but also kind of one of its strengths in some ways, is that the kind of just it was made for J.J. Abrams to have open strings that other people could fill in later. That's pretty much what he does. Is he's like, here's a bunch of open threads.
With no end point.
With
They
no
should've-
endpoint in mind, but like Disney set this up so that J.J. Abrams would make this movie to say, here's a bunch of threads. Whoever comes in next, like Ryan Johnson, Colin Trevorrow, like take this and go with it what you want. I think that
And then afterwards,
I think
can
that
come back and fuck up your plans.
No, and I will say,
disagree
like,
with that.
you don't think that's what this movie does?
This movie is about
does.
giving a bunch of
Is that
empty
not,
Christmas
like-
boxes.
I
Do
disagree
you
with
not
that.
think that's what the movie
Well,
does?
yeah,
then?
I mean, and the reason why I don't think that is because, like, first of all, on J.J. Abrams, the way he writes is mystery box that doesn't have a gift in it. No secret to reveal. He just comes up with a good way to set up a secret, but he doesn't know the answer.
Okay, and here's what, but like, let me just cut in here real
sure,
quick
sure,
and like
sure.
say this is why, like, this is a weakness for the movie because it doesn't have a lot of closure, but I also think it's kind of one of its strengths because that's how J.J. Abrams writes. And by basically
I don't think
giving him a formula that's like not cohesive but more what he's used to, he's actually able to hone in himself as a writer. When you look at a movie like Rise of Skywalker, where he actually has to bring closure to everything, he can't do it. When he's able to open mystery boxes that he knows he doesn't have to complete, he's much more cohesive as
I mean,
a writer
I will
and director.
second you on the part that J.J. Abrams was definitely not the right type to make Episode 9 in the first place. I do just not like J.J. Abrams' style of writing in the first place, and the reason I think as to why it wouldn't work as a setup either is because if you look at The Force Awakens, on first glance, it seems like he's just setting up mystery boxes for other people to like reveal and then work up from there. But there really is nowhere you can like actually take the story from The Force
You
Awakens.
should never. It would be.
And I will
like,
elaborate on that in a second
It
because
would.
that's a broad
It would
statement.
be like writing a mystery novel, or like writing the first parts of a mystery novel and handing it to someone, but writing it so it's an impossible mystery. It's like, all right, this person was, shot from an angle that's impossible for it to be suicide, but the room was locked and there's no possible way to enter the room. How?
Also, this isn't the way
It's
that
like-
you make a trilogy, especially one that feels like it's
Correct.
each part
Yeah.
is going to be like connected to each other.
Mhm.
It clearly didn't
And
happen
also,
that way.
yeah, I will go back to what I was saying, and like, if we're looking at examples of why I don't think it's possible to continue the story, there are certain, like, for example, we take Rey. You totally, like, she is overpowered in this movie for sure. You could totally try to explain that, but like, what
I
are
mean, they do.
what
Yeah.
are the options at hand?
Pretty well, I think.
Like,
Yeah, very well.
either do what they did in The Last Jedi, which was done, in my opinion, fairly well, but a lot of people will be upset about that, or you have to make her somebody, which we saw how that worked out. There was no way to make her a Palpatine, which was really the thing I still feel like they were going for in the first place.
I do like that now canonically then, that Palpatine has fucked.
Yeah, that's.
That's
I
the
leaned over to
only
my
good thing that came out of sequel trilogy.
I leaned over to my brother. I'm like, this means Palpatine's fucked. And
You get it all?
he was like, oh, just like,
So, like,
"Ugh."
from a character standpoint, there's nowhere you could take Rey that would be interesting, because you have to do like the lineage thing. Or Finn, if you look at him, his character arc in the movie is introduced and wrapped up in 15 minutes and then discarded into the trash compactor.
Honestly, if he died at the end of episode 7, like in the fight against Ren,
That would have been great.
Sure.
I wouldn't have been opposed.
That would have been fine.
And
that
he
would have
become-
actually like
This is
completed his arc.
This is kind of fan theorizing, but then he becomes like a martyr for other defected stormtroopers.
Who, like, once again,
Could be cool.
you don't have to tell me who the fuck Snoke is in episode 7 and maybe leave that to Ryan Johnson, but there is no satisfying way to reveal who the fuck Snoke really is.
I disagree with that.
No.
Darth Plagueis, that is bullshit.
Well, he doesn't even look anything like. We know.
No,
what
it
Darth
was-
Plagueis
no, but
looks like.
Darth Plagueis looks that way.
People
in the
thought that
expanded
he
universe.
was Mace Windu.
Yeah, like
There
that
were-
is bullshit.
There were
That's
theories
stupid,
like that.
actually.
No,
I'm like, this
no
is
matter
dumb.
what theory, and I think, I mean, we're gonna get to The Last Jedi, but that's
Yeah.
one reason I think that was a great choice because he made it work within the story. Is because there is literally no way you can make this generic Emperor 2.0 that's a little shittier, but hey man, at least it's Andy Serkis. Work.
Andy Serkis gives a good voice
Well,
performance.
it's
Andy
Andy
Serkis is a god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like other
He
than
can't,
that,
he can't direct a movie.
you
Like,
cannot
he's a
take.
god. He's a
No,
good
like,
actor.
well, like you say you think there are ways where you could take Snoke. Like I legitimately do not see any. That would be interesting, of course.
Well, I
Kill
mean,
him.
just like I mean,
That's a way.
And it worked.
like, here's the thing: is just like make it like give him like some form of backstory that he was like around like during like the prequel days, and then like retreated on the
So just
side.
another
like,
emperor
he was
with a
like
bigger
an
bat.
aide to Palpatine or like something like that. And again, like you may say like, oh, that's not interesting. I can name
That fucking blows.
I can name a lot of people I know who would think that'd be really cool,
Okay.
and 4 of them live
It
in my
could
house.
be done interesting.
Yeah, but
Like I was just
one
straight
of
up,
your
like,
roommates. I'm not gonna.
I would say they also
They also
some of
like-
them are defenders of or
That's
like,
not true. But like, and I
like
don't want to
the
be adding
prequel
any
stuff.
people, but like some of them liked Rise of Skywalker on first watch.
That's
so like,
true. Yeah.
That's
that is
fair. I could see
Fairness.
someone like again like with Force Awakens. The first watch, I'm like, I really like that, and then the more it's like, okay,
I will buffet my hatred of Force Awakens with saying that when I first watched it, I thought it was okay. I walked out of the theater going, well, that was actually okay. And then like as the weeks went by and I thought about it more, I had more time to think about it. Just thinking, no, that was actually horrible. That was also oh God, it's all horrible. How could it all be
I
this
feel
bad?
like it's a little hyperbolic.
No, because the movie's moving so fast, you don't realize it when it's happening. But then the moment you take the time to like look at any of the writing, it all just falls apart.
I will say I don't think it actually moves that fast.
compared to the Rise of Skywalker, it definitely doesn't.
Well, no, and like
Rise
even
of Skywalker drives
well,
like a
Ryan-
BMW
I don't
stuck
think
on Gear 8.
I don't think it's
it's like, and we're going.
Yeah.
We're on the Autobahn.
I'm
I
sorry,
I
we
don't
only
think-
have sports mode.
that's hilarious. Yeah, I
Accelerator's
don't think
jammed. Fuck.
I don't think Force Awakens really that fast. I feel like it's certainly faster than the original trilogy, but it's also like
They-
made in the 20th
they
It
run
had,
through,
it had enough
like,
slow moments where I was like, okay.
They run through
Alright.
a whole lot of shit in an hour and a half.
It's not an
It's
hour.
2.5 hours.
Is it 2.5? Well,
It is
whatever.
2.5.
There's a
yeah.
big
But
difference.
Definitely 2.5.
Still, they run through a whole lot of shit.
I actually
in
think
a
the
short
movie
amount
is
of time.
paced pretty well.
Yeah.
It's
It-
just
I
that
think
it has no story to tell, but the pacing
but
of it is
it
great.
it goes fast enough that you don't have time to gestate on the writing, and I think
I
that's
don't
why.
think it's the issue of it being quick, because
Well,
Rise of Skywalker is quick
I'm
and you
saying-
notice
well,
it.
I think that's why Last Jedi.
Or another movie with like really fast
wait.
pace, but like actually like Scott Pilgrim. The pace of that movie is incredibly fast.
It
but
is.
and
It
it's
works.
And so is Lego Movie.
No,
Yeah, okay.
dude, okay.
Alex
Scott
doesn't
Pilgrim-
like Scott Pilgrim.
I don't.
He is an idiot,
It's
but we
bad.
can move on.
Anyway, but
We all like the Lego Movie.
Yes.
Everybody loves
I haven't
the
seen
Lego
Okay,
it.
then that's a frenetically paced film that also is.
Spider Verse is it is less than 2 hours long, and it has like 6
Okay,
main
let's-
characters.
We're
Yeah.
just sucking
Yeah,
on
but,
this guy's brain.
Sorry, but
La-
examples of fast movies
I mean,
with
they
fast
are.
pace.
They are. They really
They
are.
are really good.
Well, I think that's why Last Jedi was immediately hated, whereas it took a little bit of time for fans to start coming out
I
and
think it's straight
disliking
up because
Force
of
Awakens.
J.J. Abrams. Because J.J. Abrams didn't set anything
Well, no,
up
but
to
I'm
do
saying
a
Last Jedi. I think a lot of people hated it because hated it so quickly. They didn't like take time to like realize that they disliked it, because very little happens in it, and so you have time to sit there in the theater and go, no, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. They give you time to think about it.
J.J. Abrams gave Ryan Johnson nothing, and Ryan Johnson still managed to make a decent movie.
Okay, so let's get.
I'd say a bit more.
Wait,
than
are we
decent.
moving on?
I
Do-
think we should move on.
do we
I
have-
think we should move on,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
I mean, my last point for Force Awakens would be like, I think it left a lot of threads that could have been built on.
I mean,
Personally,
not
like-
Rey, not Finn, not Kylo Ren. Yes, I will say Kylo Ren is a great.
No, even Ray. At least she had
Yeah,
like, the hook of
the-
who are her parents. What is her
There
backstory?
there are things you could
there's
do
no
with
good
the
backstory
characters.
for
Yes,
her. Like
there's-
she's either a
like-
Skywalker or what? Are you gonna make her a Kenobi?
No,
even
no, okay.
even ignoring
It was a cool thread going into Episode 8, which then was.
But
resolved.
how do you solve it?
even
then?
even
They did
ignoring
in Episode 8.
even ignoring
It's
the
like-
paths that you could do that like even ignoring the threads that JJ left, you could still take them in interesting directions.
and
like,
Which
if
Ryan
you-
Johnson kind of
Right.
did.
Well,
Yeah.
if you looked at the end of episode 4, Luke, it seemed like his arc was complete. Han, it didn't seem like he had
It
an
was
arc.
supposed to be a standalone
Yeah.
movie.
Leia didn't have an arc, and still
It was
you
still
managed to
written as
take
a
them in
trilogy,
interesting
but
directions.
He chose
after
Episode
that.
4 to make because it's the one that could work as standalone,
I would
but
say,
still
yeah.
leave it open.
He wasn't sure other movies.
But-
He wasn't
yeah.
sure because the funding. He wasn't sure that they would
But
get
still,
funding for 5 and
it felt
6.
like
It's
there
still
weren't
barely
threads left to go with, and yet you can take them in interesting directions. Last Jedi, I think, did not, but we'll get to that.
Well, let's get to that right
Let's
now.
get
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
On,
So
I mean,
stances,
yeah,
yeah.
on Rey, I guess that's gonna be part of the Last Jedi.
Yeah.
too.
But
So,
stances, yeah.
stances on Last Jedi.
You can start.
All right.
Sure.
I really like this movie. I would go as far as to say it is probably the best movie in the Star Wars series since the originals. It's number 4 on my ranking, like original trilogy, and then just number 4 is Last Jedi. I really like this one. I think it. Yeah, we'll dive into why, but yeah, I like it.
Okay, I'll go next. Full disclaimer, I personally, I'm pretty good at distinguishing how much I like a movie and how good I think it is. This is my favorite Star Wars film. I love this movie a lot. It is not perfect. It definitely has a lot of issues. There are certainly many moments where its writing and its attempt to subvert expectations just doesn't stick a landing. I think a lot of the times it actually does, though. As far as a technical standpoint goes, it looks great, it sounds great, and I think the biggest problem with the movie is the writing. But if you look at how well, like Rian Johnson, for example, directs his own script, I think really The Last Jedi is just about the best movie you could have made with the screenplay you were given in terms of almost every other aspect of the film. All the actors do a great job. Whoever shot it, I can't remember the name, they did great. Their 35 millimeter looks incredible. The sound design's amazing. John Williams once again hoists the series on his shoulders, So that's where I stand on it.
Well, okay, as an author myself, the thing I mainly look at in movies, as the thing I mainly look at in movies is writing. And from that perspective, I say that this movie was utter dog shit. It's worse, I think, than Force Awakens, better than Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, so I think The Last Jedi is, among all the Star Wars movies, it's the highest at its highs and the lowest at its lows.
Rise of Skywalker came.
Well, I mean, the Rise of Skywalker. It's to me, it's once again, it never it's always on the level of just like.
And then JJ said, "Get your shovels, boys."
There's no
We're
ball,
going lower.
There's no ball to drop in the Rise of Skywalker.
I agree. It has the highest peaks in the as far as individual movies go. This one definitely has more peaks and valleys than any of the other Star Wars films.
That's where I stand on it. When I saw that movie for the first time, I loved the shit out of it, but that's primarily because I expected something like The Force Awakens, and what I got was actually a movie that had a soul, and I was surprised.
In a vision.
Yeah. It definitely is the only movie that, even in its visuals, that doesn't just feel, good looking for the sake of being good looking. It's a movie with a style, it's a movie with a vision, and a movie with some, artistic thought put into it. The writing is pretty strong compared to other sequel trilogy movies, in my opinion. I do think the writing here is better than it is in The Force Awakens by a decent margin. It's definitely not perfect. I don't think this is the greatest movie of all time. I don't think this is the greatest Star Wars movie of all time. Overall, I think it's pretty good.
All right, well, I'll read out the plot of it.
Yeah, that's fair. We should do that. Please, no bias.
Yeah.
Keep it neutral.
Poe takes out the Star Destroyer. The Kylo Snoke discussion. They're tracked through hyperspace, and then they send out the TIE fighters. There's Force visions. There's Cantabite.
There is Cantabite.
Rey leaves to save Kylo Ren. Poe rebels on board the ship. Finn is caught aboard the Supremacy. They escape. Or launch escape. I forget what that is. But the throne room scene, the hyperspace crash, and Crate.
Yeah, that's
and
about right.
The death of
The
Luke
broom.
Skywalker.
Well, that's part
Crate.
of Crate. That's all.
I know,
Crate.
but I just feel like that's severe.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that was a good analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
Good
so moving on to
Yeah,
Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, that's
All right,
we
yeah,
need to
good
know.
enough.
So let's start out. All right, so Jonah Falcon.
All right, so Six Underground, great movie or greatest movie?
All right, so actually, Last Jedi.
Yep,
Do we
The
wanna-
Last Jedi.
All right,
And
Last
Alex
Jedi.
is going to drive the conversation astray.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Those guns would work on
Yeah,
the ships.
drive the conversation into a ditch.
I'm going to jump this ship at light speed directly into the ground.
Which is actually a thing that they've done before. Other Star Wars extended universe stuff.
Right. No, but it's a 1 in a million move, wasn't it? Isn't that the?
I mean, yeah. No, they don't do it a lot.
Please don't remind me that.
What if you tried the whole?
All right,
I'm
so-
afraid eventually we will have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna say give us a 45 to an hour and we'll be there.
This
Strap
weapon
in,
is
love.
a Jedi's weapon. Treat it with
Alright.
respect. Ray.
So
Oh shit! Here we
First-
go again.
first issue is a carryover, or pretty much the same issue that came from the world building in episode 7, and that's why is the First Order in power, right? So it makes no sense that they're in power, considering that in the last movie they were a secret like group that was like loved the Empire from the original trilogy, that they were secret and came out and they were like, great, we've got the nuclear option, Starkiller base, we destroyed the old destroyed the old Republic now, and now we're in power because we've got Starkiller base, and so nobody can rise against us. And then Starkiller base is gone, so now what? It would be the equivalent to if America lost the nuclear deterrent during Cold War. Nobody would give a shit about us anymore.
I mean, in episode 4, they destroy the Death Star, and the Empire's still in power.
Right.
I will agree that that's a little different.
Yeah, that is a very different thing.
But I mean, I'm willing to just accept, okay, they're in power, now just continue the
I mean,
movie. It's like,
I will have to add here, it's not as much defending The Last Jedi, but, like, the thing is, in episode 7, you already have a weird premise of, like, this secret organization who rises up and, like, they already have a weapon of, like, star-destroying capacity that's more powerful than anything that has ever been, like, done before. They're still secret, and then there's the New Republic, which I think doesn't have an army or, like, a fleet or anything like that. And there's this, like, rebellion type of resistance, which is supposed to fight the New Republic's wars for it. So the set, like, the world building setup already doesn't make sense, is what I'm saying. So, like, yes, it still doesn't quite make sense here. Even though I could try to, like, justify it, it wouldn't really cover up for it.
Yeah,
That's just kind of what we have.
So yeah, so just walking into it, we have a weird issue. I was gonna say, and they also have no superpower anymore, and the entirety of the
They have
universe
ships.
hates them.
They have
They have ships,
like
but
in the big dreadnought.
essentially they went from America saying we have an H-bomb, so if you want to go to war with us, we will wipe your country off the map, to if you want to go to war with us, we have an army, so we will go to war with you.
I mean,
Which
they
is-
have the biggest army in the world. It's like, for
Well,
example,
do they? We don't.
Well,
Presumably versus
yeah.
the entirety of the universe.
Well, they
like-
did. In fairness, they did wipe out all 7 planets of the Republic, which very conceivably could have had a vast majority
Right,
of
but
their
they have
resources
the
on them.
entirety of the rest of the galaxy that doesn't like them. So
I mean, there's
I
just
don't,
not
I don't
enough-
know. I like those odds.
on one hand, that is true, but on the other hand, we have seen in Star Wars time and time again the fact that just because everyone hates one specific large empire doesn't mean that every single person in the galaxy rises up to stop them.
Well,
I mean, time and time
I
again,
think-
in the series, it has been like, we need more people, and then someone says like, there's no more people. It happens a lot.
in the case of the Empire, like, I
Let's
will
see.
have to say that
they
they
had a lot
actually,
of allies.
and not only that, but like, there were many, like in the EU, I guess, but there were planets and worlds which rose up against the Empire, and the Empire brutally like suppressed those uprisings, and that's why nobody ever tried to do it again. They had the fleet of like the Republic, and they had the Death Star, so they actually had the power to back it up. I will say that without Starkiller Base, the First Order was still supposed to have like the strongest fleet in the galaxy, but like it's hard to talk about something that was not explained well in the movies, and there's not enough like new expanded universe material to speculate on it.
I think there's like more important and like bigger problems, and just like sorry, not problems. I meant to say like bigger, more pressing issues, I guess,
In Last Jedi, I mean?
That's not the right word. I just mean like there's more important stuff happening than like the world building doesn't make a ton of sense.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant to say.
I wasn't sure if you meant in world like, well, we've got bigger fish to fry. We're not talking about these First Order.
Would any of us say that the world building in the sequel trilogy was good? Because I would not.
No.
Okay,
Okay,
we're good.
No.
Everything's
Okay,
settled.
good.
We're moving on.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the same issue we had in Force Awakens is here in Last Jedi.
And it will be there.
Yeah, it will be
No,
there
it's
again.
Skywalker.
It'll be there in full force.
Oh, it will be there stronger. The Force is very much with that one.
Yeah, they cut it down, and then it
All
became
right.
more powerful than I could possibly imagine.
I've seen this raw
So,
strength.
so here's the next question: Is this movie trying to be morally ambiguous or black and white? Is it trying to say here's the good guy and here's the bad guy, as every other Star Wars movie does, or are they trying to say that there's moral grayness, right?
I think it's definitely trying to say that there's moral grayness. How successful it is at the end of the day is kind of up to task, but I think there's like undeniably scenes in which they look at the fact that like, oh, they're selling to the good guys and
Right.
the bad guys. Like there's definitely more grayness in it than in the stereotypical classic American Western style that most of the other Star Wars movies take on. Although I will say that by the time everything is all said and done, it kind of has worked its way back into the box a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with
especially in the
episode 9, yeah.
Well, no. I mean
Even with
specifically.
eight,
I mean
episode eight,
specifically
yeah.
on whatever the salt planet is. I can't remember the name.
Crate.
Great.
Yeah, specifically on Crate. I think like they really
Having
kind of
flashbacks.
they kind of
The
go.
Crate stuff was good.
The Crate stuff.
Salt.
I think it's
It's not hot,
I
guys.
also think it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think Crate's fine. I think it's visually
Oh,
stunning.
yeah.
Like I think that whole scene just looks absolutely
Yeah.
gorgeous. Not even just in the visual effects, but in how everything is shot. So
Mhm.
so
It's nice. You have
elegantly.
good production design in that episode.
Yeah.
9.
Well, 9 is just a shit show.
Yeah, I will say like during Crate, I think you really kind of do push it into the box of
Mhm.
like, hey, here's our heroes and they're over here, and here's our bad guys and they're over there, and
Mhm.
they are never going to be able to get along, you know.
Yeah.
That was a massive issue I had with the movie. Honestly, was that it always seemed to dangle the carrot of ambiguity, which I love. It always seemed to kind of test the waters and say we want to talk about there being kind of a moral gray area with like the weapons runners selling to both the good guys and the bad guys idea, but then it always kept saying like there's moral ambiguity, but we can't really do moral ambiguity,
Yeah.
so we're just going to pedal that back and say there's good guys and bad guys and just leave it at that.
I will have to say that like not Star Wars as a genre, but like
Mhm.
Star Wars as its own thing, especially if we're talking about like the Star Wars movies, like the
Mhm.
Skywalker saga. It's always been it's always
42
been
years in the making.
yeah. It's definitely always been very black and white, and while I will totally agree that this movie tries to like blur the line a little bit and add moments of like, is this black, is this white, I think this is kind of gray, it still very much is black and white.
Right.
And like I feel like a lot of people were in particular misunderstanding what Rian Johnson was going for with like Rey and Kylo Ren kind of like not fitting in with their sides, because I don't think the movie ever tried to say that like the Jedi are actually truly evil and the Sith are
Right,
bad
no.
too. Like I never think they actually went for that angle.
No, well, I mean,
I
my
think what they were trying to
yeah.
go for was that like both sides are flawed. Obviously the Sith, but like even the Jedi, like Luke brings up the failings of the Jedi, and he's like, if we want to survive, we have to change and like evolve. Not be morally like gray, but like the Jedi have to change.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not like the Sith
Well,
and the Jedi are both
see-
bad. It's more like the Jedi are flawed,
Yeah.
but we still need the Jedi.
see,
But they need to change and
Yeah.
grow.
My-
like the
my-
franchise
yeah.
needs to change and grow
My-
going
my-
forward.
my issue,
Which I think was a clear. Sorry, but I just want to
Yeah.
finish. Which was a very like clear thing that Rian Johnson was trying to say. He's like, we need to move past what it's been, but also don't forget what it is. Like you just have to sort of
right.
evolve it. Like what's the next logical step?
He definitely was saying
That's
that.
a great point.
My
Which I really like.
my issue more that I was taking though is that it's I'm not saying like Star Wars should as a whole be morally gray, because that's just not what it's set up to be. Maybe in the EU they
Like
certainly
Clone
did
Wars.
it very well. But
Actually, yeah, Clone Wars.
what I'm saying is that this movie tries to be on both sides of that line. It tries very hard to stay to that dualism that is key to Star Wars, the good guys and the bad guys. But it also it wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to pretend that it also has depth to its morality, where it just doesn't.
I mean,
Where they just keep they introduce the depth and then they immediately strip it away and bring it back to
Well, I mean, what
the
do they
base.
strip away?
Yeah, what do they strip away?
Well, I have a couple of examples.
Porgs. Porgs.
All right.
That would be funny.
Fucking porgs.
That would be funny.
So, for example, the character of Luke, right? A big part of him, or a big part of his change in this movie, like it or not, was his shift from being like just a total virtuous hero.
Yeah, I like it.
Well,
I like his arc in this movie.
so yeah, but
It's a great arc.
it's his shift from being a total virtuous hero to someone who's, possibly who is able to get up to the line of murdering a child in his sleep. Like it or not, I personally don't, but that's besides the point. But then at the end of it, they just get rid of that. And okay, the Jedi are needed anyway. Luke is the hero.
Well,
I
no,
disagree
that's his
with
whole
that.
character arc. His whole character arc is about like not being like feeling kind of feeling the guilt and the flaws within himself and not being able to accept his role as like Luke Skywalker, the prodigy. And like the ending of the movie, like for him, I think, is him like seeing past his flaws, learning from this experience of kind of like rising back to the status of that legend, where it's like I might not be like an all-powerful, all-knowing Luke Skywalker, but it doesn't mean I can't be that for the Resistance type of thing.
So what you're saying is that he goes from being the kind of ambiguous, like not entirely paragon of light person that he is at the beginning of the movie, to the paragon of light he is the legend at the end of the movie.
No,
He's-
not
I feel like
necessarily.
he's-
He grows into that role. He doesn't become like a paragon of light. He
Mm,
realizes
right.
that that's what the Resistance needs, like a hero, like Luke,
So
the legendary Luke Skywalker.
Right,
so he
right,
grows
but-
into that.
But what I'm saying is at the beginning, they introduce this ambiguity of he is maybe flawed and broken in some way, and at the end they just say, well, this is what the Resistance needs, so I'm just going to be the good guy now.
But the thing is, no, I feel that Luke has never been this like perfect paragon, even in episode
Right.
6.
No, I don't think so.
But like,
But yeah.
the universe views him as that. They view him as the man who like took down the Empire, redeemed his father, or whatever. Like all this stuff. They're like, wow, he's a legend. He did that, and Luke kind of feels the pressure of that, and he's like, I can't live up to this legend, which I think is kind of like fascinating because like he has that scene where he's like, I became a legend, and then I messed up, so like I failed the status that I had. But in the end, he has to realize that like this thing that he's been resenting, where he's like, I'm not this legend, I'm this legend. He has to accept that, okay, I may not be perfect, but I have the power to like inspire and like do all of this. So he sort of accepts the role that yeah, I can be the legend even though I am not like perfect and a legend.
But I mean, even so, they introduced him as a character that's saying we need to get rid of the good guys, we need to get rid of the bad guys, like we need to do
But then
away.
he learns that's not right
Okay, so
with Yoda.
in other words, they tried to introduce moral grayness with saying we should get rid of this system because it's flawed and doesn't work, and then he learns no, it's not right to say that. We need to go back to being black and white with
No,
the Jedi
he's-
and the Sith.
no, the
No,
scene
that's-
with no,
no,
the
He
scene
said
with
that the universe needs the Jedi and the Sith.
no, the scene with Yoda. He's like the Jedi are not inherently wrong. It's just that they had a flawed ideology.
Yeah, it's not
So
about it's not about saying
again, it's
like
about
this is not
change.
gray and this is just
It's
white.
about change, not gray.
Yeah,
it's about moving forward.
It's
and
about it's
changing.
saying that like the ambiguity is there and like you can have your flaws and your teachings can be wrong, you can make mistakes, but it doesn't automatically mean that you're bad. You can just change and you can adapt and like you can move on.
To
is
me,
kind of what
it's a
saying.
lot like that scene where they're in the ship with the hacker guy, Finn and Rose, which I mean we all agree Cantobite is
the best
horrible,
subplot in all
yeah.
of Star Wars.
I think this is like my best like plot point of the 2010s, like
Yeah.
approximately, yeah.
So we
I gotta say the
we
action.
pretty
It's
much
like it's
yeah.
like number 1 Canobite, number 2 Mad Max Fury Road.
Commentary on slavery,
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. Like, no, if I was ever given okay, I'm not making that joke.
No.
Yeah.
If a hypothetical person was ever given a choice between saving a slave kid and a slave horse,
saves the
Of course,
horse.
of course, it's gonna be the
Well,
fucking
animal
horse. Of course the
cruelty
horse.
is
Yeah.
wrong.
The kids
Slavery,
gotta help
though.
me do it too.
Animal
Yeah.
cruelty is awful. Cruelty against children. I mean, like, not.
It's also pretty bad.
It's also pretty bad.
Sometimes you gotta
Poor
give them.
horses.
Sometimes you gotta give them the buckle end of the belt to get them to see the right way.
Ooh.
Pick up the broom, boy.
Some of that is gonna be cut.
Yeah,
we're
that's
gonna-
definitely be cut
We're gonna
out.
be slicing and dicing. about this.
But yeah, so we all agree Canto Bight is horrible.
Yes.
It's awful.
But
It's also
so-
like 12 minutes of the movie, which I
yeah,
It
but
always feels way longer
it,
than
it does
actually
because
is. Yeah.
especially because they pad it out while nothing else is happening in the movie, and that's supposed to be the action
Yeah,
part.
I think they
Sure.
wanted it to be the action.
I do
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
where that plot line ends with them being on the giant ship
Yeah.
and they're like trying to break in. That stuff is cool.
Yeah,
The
I
two-
like that.
even though
stuff.
it goes nowhere.
Sorry, the two things I like about the Canto Bight stuff is Benicio del Toro. Yeah,
I love
he's just a good actor. I was looking at him in a Star Wars movie is great, but other than that,
If only he had played a good role.
I mean, it wasn't a bad role per
It
se. It
was
was just
an
a
awful
role.
No, it was fine. I didn't
Like
I
it
mean,
wasn't good. It was just a role. Like
Yeah.
it was fairly episodic. But the
I've
thing,
never, it's rare that you see a character that's like so obviously quirky that's just so uninteresting.
That's fair.
It really
Like
is.
normally you see a quirky character and they're either like really engaging or really annoying, but this was a
It
quirky
really
character
was,
that's just
yeah.
so flat.
I think he was
That's
over
not his
quirky.
fault. That's not his fault
One-
though. That's
it-
he did he
yeah.
did the best he could with the material.
Yeah,
he
and the
had.
second thing I
Yeah.
loved about this, about Canto Bight, or I guess what happened after
Just
Canto Bight,
watching the child slaves get left behind.
no, is
Oh, I applauded.
yeah.
Andrew, it's okay. You're allowed to laugh.
You get a shot of the kids just being like, no, and Inish is like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, alone in the theater, just like smoking a cigar.
Yeah, just like wiping tears away with dollar bills.
Einish's favorite part is the end when the kid uses the force to pick up the broom, as he's imagining that the kid will now just reenact Fantasia. The brooms dancing around the woo.
But yeah, the thing that I do
It's
like
child
is
slavery.
like the way they introduce war profiteering, even though they do it in a very basic way. I think is an interesting concept that wasn't really done before in like the Star Wars universe.
I like that they
In its
brought it up.
world building.
Yeah. So
It adds
the war.
It adds some meat to this very very skinny
It's
bone.
some
the,
world
the
building. at
war
least.
profiteering is actually what I was going to touch on, because what the war profiteering was supposed to do is introduce the moral ambiguity. It's
I think
supposed to.
I think you're misreading the point of the movie. It's not moral ambiguity. It's,
They literally say there's no good guys or bad guys in this war. There's just war. They literally say that like verbatim.
but this is also said by a character who betrays them later. So it's
after
kind of,
after
it's
also
like-
helping.
it's like the people. No, it's like the people.
Again,
that,
this is the
No, it's like
definition of
Benicio
moral
del Toro.
ambiguity.
It's
It's
like the-
actually pretty successful at being morally ambiguous.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
but
like,
it's
Right.
shown that like even like his like character, that's not like the way to go sort of a thing.
What? But
No,
so,
but he's
I mean,
even sad about it. Like he
Yeah.
didn't want to betray them. It's just
Yeah.
in the end, he's like, yes, sorry.
So
kid."
so
But
they-
I think the people who say like the whole like moral ambiguity thing of the story, they're misreading it. The movie is not really about that more than it is about like I said earlier, changing and growing.
yeah,
and
they're
evolving
pointing
forward.
out the flaws and that it wasn't actually black and white, so that they can like look at those flaws, say that like the idea of our movie is to move past these flaws, and that doesn't make our movie and our story inherently black and white. It just means that like we have
It adds complexity.
Well,
it's not
what I'm
Yeah.
saying is so they once again they do this thing of they introduce this character and this whole kind of plot point of the war profiteering and Benicio del Toro's character, and they say, okay, these are very morally ambiguous things, and like, see, there's not the same people who are helping the bad guys are helping the good guys, and it's this whole mess of war. And then they immediately go back to, and now we have to kill the Empire because the Empire is the bad guys. It's just they keep doing this. They keep repeating the same process of saying like, oh, like maybe there's a little bit of light in the darkness and a little bit of darkness in the light, and then they say, but then we can't just shoot stormtroopers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
It's the
if
same
you
thing
look
as
at it
having
from that
Finn
angle,
unmasked.
it's gonna be there, but like it's definitely to a degree it's always been there in Star Wars. I
Yeah.
will say it's definitely worse here in the sequel trilogy,
Oh,
like
for
as
sure.
a whole, and the
What's
Last
worse?
Jedi as well.
what's worse.
Well, I mean, the whole idea, like, Another example of that, if we move beyond just the confines of The Last Jedi, too,
Yeah.
would be like what I said about Finn's arc
Yeah,
in The
exactly.
Force Awakens,
Yeah.
where you humanize the stormtroopers and
then
then
immediately
go back
shoot
to
'em.
having them as mindless drones.
That I agree
like
with.
The Ultron
I
bot
still
army.
I still think that not the Finns thing, but the I think the ideas that this movie brings up and like actually like works with is done pretty well. Where like I don't think that I don't know. Like
I mean, the war profiteering thing is an interesting thing to explore. Perhaps not in the same way that trade routes were explored in the prequel trilogy. That was drab and uninteresting, but it is an interesting concept.
Dude, I became an econ major
On-
because
on-
of the Phantom Menace. I was so excited by the trade route stuff that I was just like, no, fuck it.
But it's an interesting.
macroeconomics.
It's
It's
an
about the saddest thing I've ever
interesting, interesting concept that was introduced in the most amateurish way of saying, look, the same people like is bringing up projection. See, they're making the other ships too.
it wasn't
They're
done like
they're
that.
selling.
It was-
They're
it was-
literally as they
It
show you
wasn't
one
done
ship.
like-
No,
I-
it
I
was
would-
it
I would
wasn't it
love
wasn't
the
that
hyperbole.
overacted. He's like, well, let's see. Oh yeah, they have this too.
No,
It's
that,
not-
that is
it
a
was-
horrible.
It wasn't the now wah. It's not like he's talking like that. He's just like
Well, I mean, he
looking-
wasn't literally like it. I wasn't saying he was in mime makeup saying, "Well, would you look at this, folks?" There.
Again, I think we're
I'm not-
starting to
yeah.
just argue over nothing, and we are in a timer, so.
Yeah.
True.
But yeah. So okay. So
Gonna be the voice of
di-
reason.
disagree. Disagree if I guess you.
I can't
yeah.
be the legend that they need.
I'm having
You
more
need to
fun.
rise to the occasion,
I'm
damn it.
definitely having more fun just sitting on the side and watching you guys go at it. Not gonna
Oh,
lie.
oh man,
Not
I'm
gonna
biting my tongue about making a joke there. I'll let the viewers or listeners fill it in with their imagination.
All right, moving on.
I definitely
alright.
filled it in with
So-
my imagination.
God damn it.
Okay, so
We have editing.
you guys haven't made this argument here on the podcast, but you've made it when we've just been talking. That you think that Kylo is another protagonist of the movie.
I think
rather
that's
than-
what I said. Like,
Okay.
I don't
You
know.
definitely said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I think that like
Mhm.
I stand behind like my theory of Kylo as the protagonist, but what I'm saying
Mhm.
here is like that's what I said, and
Yeah.
don't assume they agree with it.
Okay, yeah, fair. Okay, so it's what you said, Oleg.
Yes.
Just to be clear. And
I need to hear more about this because I don't know if I agree.
He-
I
he's-
could explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, yeah,
that,
go
'cause
ahead.
The
That makes
audience
it better.
doesn't
That
know.
makes it
Yeah,
better.
like so, the idea is that if you look at Kylo Ren's arc in The Last Jedi, he definitely grows into being just like an antagonist for Rey's character by the end of it. But as we move through The Last Jedi, you experience parts of the story from his perspective, and some parts of the story about him from others' perspective in a way that seems like it's more of another protagonist character arcs that goes like almost in parallel to what's happening to Rey, up until the end where they grow into kind of like their respective character roles in a more classic traditional way where you have a hero and a villain. That's the short version
Right.
of this.
I agree that Kylo Ren undergoes a very like hero's journey-esque arc
Mhm.
in the film. Like, I think he most certainly does. Like the
With
idea of like
the
having to get,
opposite outcome.
it's just the same. It's like how Avengers Infinity War was
Thanos
was
ability.
structured as Thanos' hero's journey, even though he's not.
A
He's
hero.
very obviously the antagonist, and I would say that Kylo Ren is still the antagonist in the sense that he is certainly the biggest obstacle for Rey to overcome in most every scenario in that film. Even when she's with Luke, he still appears to kind of like
Come up
you
the
know
works.
screw with things. So he's definitely, I would say he's definitely the antagonist, but he definitely does have that hero's journey
Like,
arc.
yeah, the interesting thing is like up until the end where once again he becomes like the villain. I'm not going to use the word antagonist here, but like the villain for Rey and just for the good guys, so to speak. He also has an antagonistic force which he has to overcome as a result of his journey, which is Snoke.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's kind of the same for Rey, but I agree that Snoke and Rey don't have that much of a connection. She's definitely more tied with Kylo Ren.
Right. Well, so I have a couple of points on that, and that is what I'm going to say is one, if they're trying to make Kylo a protagonist, they fail miserably because essentially they've taken an Adolf Hitler-esque character who has murdered and tortured several people on screen, and they gave him no redeeming qualities. and then said, well, here's your protagonist, folks, let's root for him as he's overcoming the hero's journey. Which, you know, a big part of the hero's journey is that you start out from a point of nothingness and you go through the steps of becoming a hero, and then, like, you know, it's a grassroots to hero journey. That is the core of the hero's journey. Kylo Ren goes from being the second in command of the evil people to being the first in command of the evil people.
That is literally pretty much his character arc. There's more than that, but
which
yeah.
is a cool arc, I think.
I mean, it's not just
Yeah,
like him
it's-
going from
yeah.
second in command to first in
No,
command.
Because
There's
you
more
see
stuff
him-
than that.
Yeah,
more
obviously,
happens,
but-
more happens in
But
I think we
it's-
all agree.
yeah.
I think we established. Does everyone agree that Kylo Ren is the most interesting character in the
Well, yeah.
sequel trilogy?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I just
Until
want-
episode 9. kind
probably
No,
still
even
is.
there,
no,
he's
I think
still
he's
is.
just, and I think a lot of that is just the fact that Adam Driver is a phenomenal actor.
I
I
would
think
rather
he's the
I
watch.
think that's a
He's the
big
best
part
character.
of
I
it.
just wish his arc had some
I'd rather watch
consistency.
them pull Palpatine and just resurrect him for the next trilogy than watch another one based on Rey or any of the other characters
I would gladly take Kylo Ren
over
like,
anyone else.
Palpatine.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
When
Palpatine's
episode
very
8
bland.
When episode 8 ended, I was like, Kylo Ren might be my favorite character in the entire like Star Wars.
But basically,
Episode 9
he
kinda
can't
muddled it.
he can't
Yeah.
function as a protagonist. Like
Well, I
be-
mean, I slightly disagree. Like, I agree
Well,
with what you're saying.
real quick. Can
Okay.
I finish? Yeah.
Sorry, I thought
it's
you did.
it's if you take, let's say, an example of Oscar Schindler, who when he starts off the movie, we don't like him because he's running a fucking concentration camp.
But then save the cat. Or...
But in
Jesus Christ.
in Schindler's List,
Ugh.
he is an unlikable character at the beginning,
Yes.
and then he goes through a redemption in which he becomes a likable character at the end, but still tinged by the darkness of the beginning.
You were
right?
telling me, Andrew, about how like Oscar Schindler's still like a terrible person.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just, like
he is.
You
He's
do-
still
yeah.
not a good. He's
You're
still
not supposed to
a good
like
man.
him, but you're supposed to appreciate that he did a good thing.
That's exactly the
Um,
point. Is that he's not. He doesn't really die necessarily a good man. He dies as a man who did a really really good thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is far more interesting. So.
I had to stop myself from making a bad joke there.
Yeah. Is there more to this?
Yeah,
or-
so trying to compare that to someone like Kylo, where he's supposed to be a protagonist for this movie, and he starts out as extremely hateable of having tortured the main characters of the last movie, literally blown up planets of people. And he's never given any form of redemption or thing that could help his likability. It's just something that's like the most you
the
can.
moment where he kills Snoke, I think, could have been his redemption. It's like he just killed.
I will
but
touch on
that
that,
comes
yes,
in
but
at
yes.
the very end of the movie. So for
There's a good 40 minutes after that.
well, but for the majority of the movie, you're watching your quote unquote protagonist functioning as like having no redemption, no redeeming qualities, being an evil monster.
Okay, so here's the thing.
I
I
disagree.
agree absolutely that Kylo Ren would not work as a protagonist if he was the only one in the
Okay.
movie. Yes, for sure. But we already have Rey, who is definitely the character
Right.
we're like supposed to be rooting for. And the thing they do with Kylo Ren is it's not about like I want to see this guy win. I want to see this guy succeed in
Mhm.
something that he's doing, even if I, for example, don't agree with like him and his values and whatever. But it's more like, so we see Luke Skywalker, we see Luke Skywalker's regret towards like initially pushing Kylo Ren on this path. We see Kylo Ren as a hateful person
Mhm.
who is completely horrible and does horrible things. I don't think we're supposed to agree with Kylo Ren. I think it's more of like a protagonist's arc where we look at him and we can understand where those awful things and this awful person is coming from.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, it's just interesting to explore and we feel bad for him. And like going forward, it's like he has that moment where he kills Snoke and they fight like the red, whatever, like Imperial
Praetorian
Guards.
Guards.
Yeah.
One of the
with
worst
Rey.
choreographed Star Wars fights ever.
It's
Okay, no.
questionably choreographed, yeah.
I think the staging, the choreography is weird, but it looks amazing.
It
Okay.
looks amazing, but like
What's wrong with the choreography though?
the fighting is like there are
yeah.
some moments when they were just like
I saw-
clearly going for the attack and then like
It-
oh,
yeah,
I
it's
saw
the
a
back
video.
and
I saw a
start
video where they
twirling
explained
like yeah.
it was the direction of the choreography isn't that
Mhm.
great because you see the people like waiting,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like okay now 5
There-
seconds, and
yeah.
now I attack.
No, there are
There
like
are
a few
several
moments when they
scenes
like
where-
go
where-
for the attack and then like twirl
Oh,
around.
my
like
favorite
this.
ones are when, I mean, not just the one, we all have heard the one where it's they airbrushed out the dagger. to save Rey, because there's no possible way for it to defend it, so they just airbrush it out of the scene and have him doing a motion with an empty hand. But that's one thing. But more egregious is how basically throughout the entire fight they keep holding their lightsabers up in blocking positions for like a good few seconds while they're waiting for the guards to come in and hit them.
That is definitely a thing. But yeah,
It is weirdly staged, but it looks
it does
amazing.
look very cool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It looks
Like
incredible. and I can,
everything in.
That's
Okay,
not
maybe
a
not
point
Rise
you
of
should-
Skywalker.
Okay, dude,
Yeah.
that's not the point you should be.
I will say though, like, I think a big thing, and this is just like a general thing about fight choreography, is like how much of that did you notice in real time, and how much of that did you notice when you watched a video on it?
Good point.
Yeah, like
Mm,
I
Because
remember.
because the thing is about fight choreography is all fight choreography in like pretty much every movie ever has problems, and that's why editing is so much faster in action scenes.
Right.
If you can't tell when it's moving in regular speed, 24 frames a second, when you're watching it live, then I don't really think it's fair
Well,
to.
I-
degrade
It's
it
still
for
a
that.
fair thing to point it out
it's
because
fair-
like
it's-
it's something you could have not. You could
It's
not.
well,
It is
it's
definitely
also
fair
a
to
matter
point out,
of
like, I agree.
there's
But
not.
you can't call it a bad.
It's
action
more
scene.
well. I think
looks
it is.
good.
I think
It
it's
looks
it is a bad action scene because you don't have really emotional investment in it.
Okay,
Because you
that's,
know-
Okay, that
that's an
is-
That's
entirely
actually-
different point, which
that
we
is
will get
not-
into.
Yeah.
For now, we're like, because like I was on a point and we're derailing
Fair.
to talk about the fight choreography.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Oh, yeah.
what I was saying is, at the end, Kylo Ren has that redemption. It's not even a redemption moment. It's a questionable moment, which could be a redemption moment,
Right.
where he kills Snoke and then fights the guards with Rey.
Mhm.
And for us, it could be like, so this is probably what his character arc was building up to. Like
Right.
all of those awful things he's done, he's gonna redeem himself. And it's even more interesting because the answer to that is like, no, he's just he made it all the way to another step of being evil.
Right. Well, but what I'm saying is that if what they're trying to achieve is him being a protagonist, then like you said,
I don't think they were. They were just
Okay.
giving him an arc that is similar.
Well, no, I think they were. It's just like I just explained it to you that
I'll
in,
address both sides. Don't worry.
in a film where he is not the only protagonist and we're supposed to be rooting
Yeah.
for a different character,
Yeah.
you're not always supposed to like the protagonist,
Mhm.
nor necessarily agree with the protagonist, nor even necessarily want the protagonist to succeed.
Right.
Well, here's my thing for that is that just because an antagonist has a arc similar
Yeah.
to that of a protagonist does not make them a protagonist.
Yes.
I mean,
exactly.
I'll take that. I'm not even a
Joker
film
is
guy.
not the protagonist or a secondary protagonist of Dark Knight, even though he has a similar kind of arc.
I think it's a
Yeah.
little different. But
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll
it's-
accept that.
obviously
yeah.
it's
The
different.
thing is, like, the idea of like the idea is the best antagonists are the heroes of their own story.
Yeah.
And so, in many ways, like an antagonist that follows a
Mhm.
very similar hero's journey as the protagonist doesn't make them the protagonist. They're still the antagonist, but that does allow them to be
Yeah.
the protagonist of their own
I
story.
want to point out that like I wasn't saying it because I, from like a film study point of view, think that like
Yeah.
he's not an antagonist, he's a protagonist. I'm not trying to sound smart by using those
Right.
words. What I'm saying is
No.
simply
He's a contact.
it's. what I'm saying is, it was
No,
funny.
I
It was
like it.
funny.
I like
Yeah.
your point.
Like
'cause I hadn't
it's
given
more
that too
like
much thought.
like
Yeah, that's
he feels like a hero in this
Yeah.
story, just like of the wrong
Right.
side, so to speak.
yeah, he does. I mean, him
Right.
and the protagonist literally like destroy the major antagonist of the series
Yeah.
in the same scene.
Yeah.
You know, like
Well, so I'll put it this way. I think if they were going for somewhat of a protagonist, they failed miserably in making him in any way likable or root. Like
Yeah,
you
I
can't
think we're
root for him.
beyond this at this
Yeah.
point.
And so, but if they weren't trying to make him a protagonist and were trying to make him an antagonist, they failed in that regard too, because 90% of the movie, up until when he kills Snoke, is serving to undermine his authority and power.
Unlike The Force Awakens, I think it actually kind of works out in this movie.
It
because,
works in this one because he grows into the role and takes over as
like, I don't think it's the situation where, like, I myself said The Force Awakens is lacking in terms of, like, its villain because it doesn't
Mhm.
have a strong villain. Here, like, it's more like you see his craziness, his madness, and straight up, like, lunacy and entitlement grow as the movie, like, gets him to that point. And when he gets into it, it's not about his physical threat in like a lightsaber duel to
Mhm.
Rey. It's not about him being able to outsmart Rey. It's about like how upset he is, how pissed off he is at a lot of people, in just how all of that madness is gonna combine with the newfound like uncontested power that he has.
Well, that's good and all. However, it's also throughout the movie he's being compared to, like, at one point, Snoke literally calls him a petulant child.
Yeah.
It's
Which
a
he
bit
is.
like it's a bit like saying, well, a chimpanzee with a machine gun, he's very unpredictable. And you never know when he's going to shoot or if he's going to shoot.
No,
I'd like
and
to-
so he's a
chimpanzee-
very
chimpanzee
dangerous.
with character with a machine gun is not going to have a character arc, and the whole reason why Kylo Ren is
What are you
interesting
saying?
is because the character stuff. And now I give it off to Andrew. I apologize.
No, you're totally fine. The point of a villain is to be the major obstacle to the hero. That's the reason a villain exists. That does not mean that a villain has to be entirely evil. That doesn't mean a villain can't doubt themselves. That doesn't mean, like, the villain could very much be someone, like, you watch, like, a comedy sketch short, for example. The antagonist in a comedy sketch short is, like, someone who's in the convenience store and, like, keeps standing in front of the guy who, like, needs to grab something before he leaves.
Mhm.
Like, they're not, like, purposefully doing wrong. They're just getting in the way. So I don't think, like, and I will, like, defend Force Awakens in this too, is that I don't think necessarily the fact that Kylo Ren isn't a big bad and that he, like, doesn't quite accept his role as, like, the evil head. I still think he's a very functional villain because he still very much is a very big problem for our protagonist.
And
to
also
overcome.
to add on to that, I do want to say that if when you say villain or antagonist, you specifically mean he's not a force against which the good guys should be fighting yet. That's a fair point. That's why we have Snoke up until that moment. Because in this movie, it's really Snoke who's the power that everybody's trying to take down. Kylo Ren, that's kind of also why I consider him as a protagonist, is not the guy blocking, like, our protagonist from reaching the cashier in the convenience store. He is the guy who's also trying to reach a cashier, like the cashier in a convenience store, but in his own way. That's also part of why I think he's not necessarily an antagonist.
Snoke.
He kind of grows into it by the end.
If you're treating
You guys are gonna kill me if I say this,
Okay.
but he,
the Porgs are the antagonist.
yes, no, the
Yeah, I'm gonna get out my key so I can remove your eye.
All right, yeah,
So-
get ready.
it's gonna sound very pretentious too, but Kylo Ren goes from being the contagonist to the antagonist.
All right, let's kill him.
No, actually, like, what is that supposed
Because
to mean?
the
But, like,
because
really,
I realized
what the
as
fuck?
because you were saying like he's the antagonist, and Andrew's like, no, sorry, you were saying he's the protagonist. Andrew's like, he's kind of the antagonist. Like
The
what I-
antagonist is the one that's like part of the villains, not
He's the
necessarily the main
figurehead.
guy, but the figure, like the
It's-
face.
Yeah, the face. Where like how I said the Empire's antagonist, and then Darth Vader's the contagonist.
Yeah.
But then he goes to become the antagonist because he becomes like the main like thing that you're fighting against by the end of the series.
I agree with that. I agree with that at this point.
I don't
Kylo
necessarily
Ren-
think he was the face of it, but I don't
Because
think it's
I
like
was
Kylo
gonna say
Ren-
because Snoke is the contagonist.
No, Snoke is he is the thing
He
that
doesn't do anything.
I actually
The
feel
an-
like it's not an important point to
I just know the way that I want to.
Snoke doesn't do anything, so he can't be an antagonist. He
No, the
sits
antagonist.
on a throne.
The antagonist is the thing that you're trying to take down. So the First Order and Snoke are the antagonists, but the contagonist is the one who's like actively out there fighting and like being against the hero.
Once again, Snoke doesn't do that.
That's why Snoke is the antagonist, because he's in the force that they're fighting.
I agree.
He
I mean, he
doesn't.
is the-
I think
he
he's
doesn't do
definitely-
anything to pose a threat or problem to them.
Okay,
Yeah, but
that's not true.
He's the head of the entire organization that's like causing all
Yeah,
this
that
problem.
is.
Kylo Ren reports directly
Yeah,
to him.
in the last
he is the
episode-
one who continuously beats down, like humiliates
in the
Kylo
last,
Ren.
yeah, in the
And
last
that's why
podcast.
Kylo Ren has to take
In
him
the
down.
last podcast, you gave an example of a contagonist as Adolf Hitler. They're not directly fighting Adolf Hitler, so he's not the antagonist. He's the contagonist because he's the face of Nazis. You gave that exact
That's
example.
not entirely correct if I said that.
Okay.
messed
I mean,
up
it
on
was
that.
Andrew who said that. That's
Was
first
it
of
you
all.
that said it?
Was it me that said that?
That
Someone
was
said
you
it,
who
wasn't me.
That was my mistake then.
Okay.
Because it's more of like the
I
one
was
who's
gonna
like.
say,
I mean, I
because-
don't even know if it's a mistake, because
But
like,
I just realized because like you both are talking about like either like.
I
he's
don't
hardly-
even think this is like that important.
I just thought it was interesting because
Yeah.
yeah, it's not that important. I just thought it was interesting because like
Cool.
you were saying like no, he is the antagonist who has a similar arc, and you're like he's the protagonist. Something like, I was like, oh yeah, there is a role for that. I just realized.
I still don't think he fits that quite well, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
I just
feel
wanna
like
bring
that's
it up.
something.
I
that
feel like
needs to be
I
Yeah.
feel like we should
Yeah.
move on.
Well, yeah, I just want to point out, I feel like that is a massive issue if you can't pin down who's the antagonist of a movie.
No, it's
If you
Snoke.
can't figure
it's
out,
definitely Snoke.
is it?
Yeah.
It's Snoke until
What does he
Kylo
do?
Okay, so for Kylo Ren's arc, he's the one who continuously humiliates him, beats him down. I mean, all
Okay,
that.
so he's
calls
the
him a
antagonist
vegetable.
to the
Snoke literally
antagonist.
orchestrates.
Well,
so
that's
that
why I'm
Rey's
saying that
broke-
Kylo Ren, up
Snoke-
until the end, is kind of not an antagonist.
I will say
Yeah,
Snoke is
like,
Snork or sorry,
much
Snork.
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 Yeah, Snork is definitely more of a character here. Like, I won't say he's a good character. I won't.
Well, I mean, he's present in the movie. So
I
he's more of a
won't
character.
extend to that, but he
2.0.
like from scene one, he is on screen, and you
Yeah.
see him, and you actively see him doing.
That's
things.
why
So
I'm
I
ready
think that's
to
a fair.
accept
I think
Snoke
that's a fair
as,
point.
like an antagonist
And
for
he
this
is the
movie,
reason-
but not The Force Awakens.
And he's
Yeah,
the
agreed.
reason that Rey, he's the reason they have Rey in their custody. He said, like, I linked your minds together, knowing that you two would
Yeah.
that he would bring you to me.
Even for Rey, like, I have to say, because, like, Rey's whole shtick in this film is trying to bring Kylo Ren to the light side, and to her, we later find out that that's not true, but to her, it's literally Snoke who took Kylo Ren, changed his allegiance towards the darkness, and is kind of, like, holding him there. And also, after he dies, that's when she realizes, oh, that's actually not true.
We figure out pretty quickly that what drove
Well, no,
him
it's
to
not
the
only
dark
Luke
side was
Skywalker.
Luke.
Because even Luke Skywalker was like, yeah, I felt Snoke's presence, Snoke's voice within Kylo. I was afraid, and that's why I pushed him into it. But Snoke has always been there.
And even in
And
the
for
end, when Luke,
Rey, like, it's Snoke's influence which stands in the way of her, like, redemption boner for Kylo.
I even like at the end when like Luke is talking to Leia and he's like, "I'm sorry," and she's like, "My son is gone. It's not your fault. Like you caused it to happen, but it's not all your fault entirely." Like, and even Rey is like, it's not your fault that Kylo was lost to the dark side. It's not your fault, and like, yeah.
All right.
Like they say it in the movie as well.
Is
Like,
there,
I'm gonna keep bringing it up
do-
every time you say that, like, so I have proven that this doesn't work at all. Like,
No, I'm
every time
not
you're gonna
saying
say
that.
I'm
All
gonna
I'm
buy
saying,
in.
all I'm saying is that I've made a point. I've made my point.
And
I don't think either of us have convinced each
Yeah.
other.
And I think we also have a counterpoint to that. So
yeah.
let's just move on.
So
how many more issues do we have left? Because we just need to get moving.
Yeah, we got about 40
I've just
minutes.
got.
Let's pick like the
Okay.
big two.
I'll do two.
Porgs.
Fucking
Porgs.
And the goddamn cannons.
I have
Goddamn.
the whole plot is proven to be essentially trivial in the end.
What do you mean?
Incorrect.
What do you mean?
Very
There's two effective changes that happens throughout this movie. Snoke dies and Luke dies. Those are the only two changes in the universe.
Those are pretty big changes, actually.
Okay,
I think this is
so
this is
Snoke
more-
is
okay, I'll-
Snoke
The
is,
main force of the First Order dies.
Snoke is in a
and Luke dies.
Okay, so Snoke is completely unseen in the first movie and completely unseen in the second movie. If he never existed
He's
at
not
all,
completely unseen. in the
not
second
complete.
movie.
Well, I mean third, I meant, but
Yeah, because he's dead.
yeah, obviously.
I just
So-
don't.
No, we see
let's-
him as a
literally-
model.
Literally, if he never existed at all, it would change nothing in the first or third movies in the overall arc.
In fairness, Disney had no idea what the fuck they were doing with these movies. So
It is still an issue with the movie, though, even if it's someone else's fault.
I don't think it retroactively
That I
hurts
don't
episode eight.
actually.
You don't think that even if it's Disney interfering with, like looking at Spider-Man 3,
No, I'm saying
you
like
say it's
I'm
Sony's fault,
saying that
but it
like
still makes it bad.
that like episode. I'm saying that like I don't think it's entirely fair to like blame episode 8 for episode 9 made by someone completely
No,
different,
no.
not fulfilling its promise.
No. That's not what I'm saying either. But what I'm saying is, at 8, you essentially introduce and then immediately get rid of the character of Snoke.
Okay, that is true, and
I think that's a fair
That's
point.
fair, but
I know that's one of
And
the
then
great
in episode 8,
points, too.
you introduce Luke again and immediately get rid of Luke. And
But
those are the only two changes in the
Okay, so
universe.
I would like to
I
have
would
a counterpoint.
say-
I will wait.
I would
guess.
say, if, like, say what you will about, like, Broom Boy and all that, but the fact is, like, if the movie had ended with that just on the Millennium Falcon, I would agree, because that would have just been them struggling to get away from the First Order,
Right.
to the second act being them struggling to get away from the First Order,
Yeah.
to the climax being them getting away from the First Order and now still struggling to get away from the First
Yes.
Order. And I would agree with that. The main thing is that one little scene at the end shows that everything that they've been through in the entire movie is now what's going to inspire the rest of the galaxy to join.
Not blowing up
The
fucking
Resistance.
Starkiller Base. That wasn't enough.
Apparently that
It's them getting their ass fucked on Crate. That's what takes it to.
No,
for
it's
the rest
the
of the
Legend
galaxy
of
to join.
Luke.
I will say apparently
After
so,
they didn't deliver on that, but once again, if you want to go for the thing where we judge a movie individually, then you can't really.
And
say,
also,
well,
if
this
you
wasn't
if you
continued
read
on, so
parts,
that's why this is bad.
if
Well,
you read
no,
parts
no.
of the leaked script, they actually continued that storyline.
Once again, the script and the movie are two
Yeah.
different things, but
I
Colin
agree.
Trevorrow's script
So
is
much
so
better.
fucking good.
It's pretty
I-
good.
it's
Oh,
actually
much
good
prefer.
compared, yes.
Yeah, compared.
I
No,
will-
not even compared.
No, I
it's
think-
literally
I
a
think-
good script.
My thing is, I think like
I would take a
do they
video
have like an
of
actual?
Luke Skywalker shitting for an hour and a half over Rise of Skywalker.
That's fair. Wait, did they
If it's
release
more
like the actual like draft, or is it just like the bullet point?
It's
list?
bullet points, but we also had like little like photo chunks
Oh
of like
god,
parts of
it's
the
so
script.
beautiful.
But,
Some of the
I mean,
words.
once again, it's definitely a point.
The end, Hux' storyline ending.
It's
in-
not a ready movie. It's not even a ready script. We just know it was gonna be.
Yeah.
But what it was gonna
How
be
much
looks
better it was gonna
fucking
be.
good.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
that I think two things. One, Disney. Two, Colin Trevorrow. So I'm not sure if the
Yeah.
film would have actually turned out.
Colin
as good as
Trevorrow's
we're-
not necessarily a
I
bad
don't know
director.
what other
I
stuff
don't
he's done.
think. I don't.
Jurassic World, baby.
Oh fuck, that's his. Oh.
I will say, yeah, and like I will say that
Not Fallen
Jurassic.
Kingdom.
He does have a decently short filmography, but Jurassic World is the second highest reviewed film in that filmography.
I don't think it's that bad.
True.
I don't
It's-
think
Jurassic World's
I don't
fine.
think it's that bad either.
It's
I
just a
think
popcorn ride.
it's just it's just pure like.
And
fun,
Safety Not
but-
Guaranteed,
but-
if you've seen it, is
I haven't.
It's no
really
Fallen
good.
Kingdom. Like,
It's really good. Safety Not Guaranteed.
I mean,
But yeah, so like I agree, but also like you made that point that there's a big difference between a script and a movie, and I
There is.
agree. Although I will say like
I
Colin
trust-
Trevorrow's script was like I originally thought that like
it sounds
seven.
better.
I originally thought that 7 and 8 could like never be salvaged in a third
Mhm.
film that could wrap it up, and I will say that the bullet points of Trevorrow's script actually just about proved me wrong, because I think it did a great job actually like not ignoring the tonal differences in the two films and actually tying everything together.
And then Disney turns to JJ and said, "Do it, do it, do it,
Yeah.
do it."
I don't. Why would? Because like Colin Trevorrow
Have
didn't
you
have an
ever heard-
opportunity to ruin his reputation
Have you
with the
ever
Star Wars.
I think the reason
No,
why
that-
didn't he?
No,
Tragedy
Colin
of
Trevorrow-
he made a
the
book
Did
of
he
Henry.
not
He
ignore
made- yeah,
the Last Jedi
the reason
enough?
is-
Like,
He
He made
made the
Book
Book of Henry, which was a bomb both at the box office and with critics, and Disney basically looked at it and said, "Wait a second, this guy's not that good," and then like fired him.
Which I don't think is
and gave it
fair.
to J.J.
Could they have
Abrams.
kept the
I will
script
say
and
J.J.
then
Abrams
just
is a-
have JJ direct?
It's a far
Would that have worked?
it's
I
a
would
far
have liked
safer
that.
bet.
That could have worked, yeah.
What could have
Okay, J.J. Abrams is
Kept
never
the
going to be a
script and
safe
like-
bet
Yeah.
for.
No,
Keep the
if
script.
JJ
Never
keep the
mind.
script.
If JJ,
Exactly,
if J, I still think if J.J. Abrams had directed the script, he might not have been able to hold back. On,
Yeah, no, I was
like,
gonna
his
ask you by
full-
saying that
No.
like J.J. Abrams can't write a conclusion, but if it's like his
Yeah.
Trevorrow's script, then like
JJ can
fuck.
direct
J-
a good looking.
I
Okay.
think yeah,
Yeah, I
JJ
think JJ
makes
is
good looking
good.
things. He just writes.
He can't
terribly.
write. He can't write.
Also,
at all.
he teamed up with the man who wrote Justice
Justice
League and
Oh.
Batman v Superman.
Wait, Zack Snyder?
No, Chris
Chris
Terrio.
Terrio.
Okay.
Who
Yeah,
wrote
who-
one good script?
Yeah, he
with
wrote
Argo.
fucking Argo, and that script's fantastic.
Oh,
But-
Argo. Oh yeah, that was.
He did Argo, and then Batman,
Batman
v
v
Superman,
Superman.
That was less fantastic.
and then
He's-
Justice League.
I
That
was
was
like a bat.
even less
I
fantastic.
dig it.
Chris Terrio's like a classic example. Like I think we're seeing a lot these days of filmmakers who like
Our shit.
no,
Actually,
yes,
no.
actually yeah, but also I mean in fairness, like the vast majority, like we
I would say a lot of
Well, I was gonna
2019
say-
was actually fucking wonderful.
yeah, 2019 was a very
It's-
good year for
The
me.
aside
best
from
movie for
Rise.
cinema for in a long time.
Yes,
Yeah,
I will
but
say that.
yeah, I mean, and also like the entire history of cinema has had more bad movies than good movies being released to the public.
Well,
We just don't know because a lot
Of
of
course.
them have been lost and destroyed because they're on celluloid film
Really?
and no one wanted to remember them. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing a big influx of like people who are really good when they make small movies and then they get a bigger budget and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Chris Terrio is a great example as a screenwriter.
Joe Wright, who made Pan, as well as Darkest Hour and Pride of Prejudice. Good example.
Darkest Hour is good.
Yeah, I think both those movies
Pan
are good.
is
I think
not.
Pan is
Yeah.
one of the worst films
Not-
ever made.
That's the one with Robin Williams, too.
No,
No, that's Hook.
That's
Hook
that's
is good.
Which
Hook
is
is good.
which
Hook
is
is
significantly
really good.
better than Pan. I wouldn't say it's like anything to call home about, but it's significantly better than
It's
Pan.
a fun time. It's not
Um,
Pan.
Yeah, I mean, you have Tom Hooper, who made King's Speech and Les Mis, which I think is fine.
Wait.
But then he made Cats, and that's awful.
Tom Hooper's, that the same Tom Hooper that did Texas Chainsaw?
I do
No,
not think
that's
so.
Tobe Hooper.
Toby Hooper. Oh,
And that's a
Okay.
big
That's a
big
big difference.
Yeah, not the Hooptober.
Yeah,
Right, but
I'm
we
gonna-
definitely
I'm gonna softly butt in, like we
Yeah.
are on
Okay,
on
fair
a
enough.
timer, so like
Yeah,
if we're
yeah.
gotta go.
off
But-
topic, it's
okay,
fine, but
but
like
yeah.
we should.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Yeah,
so you disagree? You think that Broom Boy in the end is enough to make it worthwhile?
I would
that
if the
changes it from being the exact same scenario in the beginning as in the end.
I
is
think
Broom Boy.
I think it changes the scenario enough in the sense that like, and I admit that it should be more. Like I'm fully with you on that. I think
Yeah.
you made a really good point. But I do think that like the Resistance has gotten their ass completely whooped. This
Mm-hmm.
is the down point, end of second act. It's supposed to be pretty grim for them, and then it also gives us a little spite of that start of the third act, which is because these people like Starkiller Base was like so easy. Like and they just went in and did it in the same way they did the Death Star, and everyone said, "Oh, cool, they did the Death Star again. Whoop de frickin' do." But here is like people who are like very much on the verge of death, who are like able to miraculously escape because like two people were able to go above and beyond what they normally would have done because they saw this cause as important and that inspired people. And I think that's fair to point out.
I also like the way that it sets up everyone for a concluding like film, where Luke.
Thank you, Rise of Skywalker.
An excellent execution on what he was handling.
But the like even like Kylo Ren, he's like, the war is over, the Resistance is dead, and when I kill you, I'll kill the last Jedi. And then Luke is
Every
like,
word of what you just
says
said is wrong.
I love the editing of this scene where he's like,
Oh, the editing's so
the rebellion is reborn. And I'm like, yeah, they have like, because now like Poe is kind of more in charge because Leia's handing off the baton to him. The war is just beginning, and I will not be the last Jedi. And then you see Rey,
Yeah.
the new like completely separate from the Skywalkers, the whole bloodline. Again, thank you, Rise of Skywalker, but separate from the bloodlines from all this, like who comes out and is the fresh start, and she will lead the Jedi into this new era and this new evolution of what the Jedi are. I think that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, I agree, and I
That's
think
amazing.
this for me goes back to my one of my big things about The Last Jedi, which is that it's way too long. It doesn't do nearly enough in the time that it has,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really change much of anything at the end of the day. Like, I mean, I just made the point, but like, I still don't think that's like a whole lot. But what it does do, I think it does with like expert technicalities.
And
I
the
think it's really
Okay.
looks great. It's well acted
Yeah, I
and it's
do
well
have to say
edited.
here, like, I also think, it's more of a my point really, but I do think that it's an issue of phrasing, because if you just say that this movie amounts to Snoke and Luke Skywalker dying, it sounds like nothing really happened much. But,
they also went to Cantabite, I'll give you that much.
and let's not speak about that, that's not
Talk about
something you want to remember.
Talk about inconsequential. Jesus Christ.
Dude, I still remember. I wish I could forget.
Honestly, with that same thing, you could say like nothing happened in. This is a weird example, but nothing happened in the lighthouse.
Okay,
Two guys are
nothing,
on
okay,
Lighthouse.
but actually nothing
Actually,
happens in the lighthouse. And
literally
that's great,
nothing.
and
And
that's great.
Yeah,
Same
but,
with Once Upon a Time in
Yeah,
Hollywood.
once-
yeah, nothing happened. But
Yeah,
it's
once
like
again about
Once Upon a Time in
The Last Jedi, though.
What the fuck are you talking about? Nothing happens in
Only
Once
at the
Upon a
end.
Time.
Oh yeah,
That's it.
sorry. No, I
I
no,
don't know,
'cause I
something
said
pretty big
Once Upon a Time in
happens.
Hollywood, and because those movies are structured the same, my mind
I thought you
went
said
to
Once
Once Upon a Time in the
Hollywood,
West,
I was
but
agreeing with that.
I completely did not mean to say that because that movie has a lot going on.
Okay, so
Quite a bit happens.
the thing is, like, Snoke's death is essential. Like, okay, preamble. The Last Jedi is definitely more of a character-driven movie than it is a plot-driven movie.
Yes.
And for that reason, by the end of the movie, most changes that occur are character changes. Snoke's death is
That
very.
was me in the theater watching last year.
Dude, my theater was like applauding like crazy
Yeah,
by
mine
the end of
too.
it. But yeah,
Mine
regardless.
wasn't.
Regardless, I watched this movie in Russia. People there have no taste, just like me.
You are a miserable.
Because the vodka's burnt off your taste buds.
I wasn't talking about that taste, but you're not wrong. So, Snoke's death is essential to establish Kylo Ren into the irredeemable antagonist that he is supposed to be in the last movie. Thank you, Rise of Skywalker.
Wasn't he already an irredeemable?
No, he was not. The Force Awakens as a whole was
He
about.
kills Han Solo.
Okay,
He tortures
after
Poe.
The Force Awakens, every other
I mean, you
theory
could
about
argue-
He blows up 7
no,
planets.
hold up.
You could argue
Every
Darth
other
Vader is
theory
irredeemable at that point.
after The Force Awakens was about Kylo Ren redeeming himself. Kylo Ren was set on a path where he didn't redeem himself in the moment with his father, but he very much could still redeem himself. This movie, it made the statement that, like, Snoke is gone, Snoke's influence is gone, Kylo Ren rejected all of the teachings that were above him, he's forging his own path, and he's just evil himself, too.
Well, I mean,
That's the
granted,
point
I
it
don't
made.
think Episode 7 did it well, but I think Episode 7 was supposed to be that exact thing.
Did not say that at all.
No, it was very much about him being kind of struggling between light and dark, and then
Well, no,
eventually
there-
embracing, and then choosing and embracing the dark.
No, he never, like, that's the thing. By the end, he loses to Rey. He never embraces the
Well,
darkness
he loses.
necessarily.
No, he embraces the darkness when he kills Han Solo.
Well,
That's
no,
the whole point of
when
that
he kills
scene.
Han Solo, he can't let go of the darkness, but he's still on the fence. Like,
No,
I
even
agree. I think when he does it definitely like haunts him going forward.
Yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
in The Last
It's-
Jedi,
it's not
he's
like
like
he
he can't
doesn't,
kill
he's like-
Leia, for example.
It's not
He
it's
still
not like
can't.
he kills Han and then he's like, yes, this feels right. This is everything
Well, yeah,
I've ever
no,
wanted.
but
you
Literally
know?
in The Last Jedi, Snoke is like, yeah, and the action of killing Han Solo has split you.
Yeah.
Like, you are so
Okay, well,
conflicted
once again,
right now.
that's also kind of changing. That's the.
That was actually fairly consistent with the
Well,
Force
no, I'm
Awakens.
saying that's taking something from Episode 8 and saying it's for Episode 7.
But Episode
Which
7
we've
said-
is
which we've
still-
said before.
Which
we
is
shouldn't
still
do.
fairly consistent with what Episode 7 was going for. So it's not.
Episode 7, I think, makes it a pretty clear thing. He kills Han Solo, and yes, he feels bad about it.
He hasn't chosen the darkness over the light. He is still conflicted.
I don't know. He still seems to be blowing up planets and torturing people and killing his father.
He does that
and
even
trying
before
to kill
he kills his
the
father.
Jedi. Like, yeah, I
All
think
of those things he did even before he killed his father, and he was conflicted back then. He was conflicted after it as well.
Okay.
It's kind of just like the emo kid who's like doing a bunch of emo things as like an outlet.
It's
Oh
okay,
my
dude.
God.
I mean, Darth Vader
Andrew, what
Darth Vader in the
Andrew,
original trilogy
if
was far worse
Timothy Chalamet
than
played
Kylo Ren in Episode 7, and nobody asked the question when he was redeemed in Episode 6.
Right.
Kylo Ren didn't do
Well,
that much bad stuff, and
interesting-
you're already
yeah.
saying he's irredeemable by the end of Episode
isn't kind
7.
of the point of Star Wars also supposed to be that no one is irredeemable? Isn't that kind of the
Well,
point?
yeah, and Rian Johnson was trying to do something new,
Well, okay, but
which didn't conflict with Episode 7 once again.
No, but more what
Because
I'm
I think JJ was actually going for Kylo Ren, even after this, was still going to be redeemed.
Mhm.
Apparently he did
evidently
that in
did,
Episode
yeah.
9.
Evidently he
just
was very
saying.
strongly into that theory. But yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, do you guys want to
Yeah,
our final thoughts and just go into?
Yes, we
That
have-
sounds like a good
We have
moment.
20 minutes.
I
so
think
let's go.
I think I've made my points. You guys refuted them. I mean, you haven't convinced me. You may have convinced the listeners. We'll see.
That's a very
I think we're
fair,
more
neutral
concerned about
assessment.
convincing the listeners than each other. So,
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. All right.
No, Alex is irredeemable. You can't convince him.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Just like
to
Kylo Ren.
The
We could be something different.
Rise of Skywalker.
Fuck.
Okay, so we've had
So
The
incredible.
Shit, the shit leaks.
Okay, so we've
The
had
dead speak, yeah.
before we started the podcast, we agreed on kind of like a game/challenge thing
Oh, yeah,
where
yeah.
every one of us comes up with one change for the movie that would like do the most good for it, as in like change it for the better the most.
I have been changed for
But before we do that, let's do the intro statements.
Alrighty.
All right, go.
So I loved it. I thought it was just incredible. Okay, no. To give it to explain how I felt, the movie ended. I checked my phone and I saw a text from Andrew saying, "So what did you think?" And immediately afterward, I called him, and like it sounded almost like it sounded like one of those like depression vlogs where like the person sits at the camera, you're like, yeah. It was very much a case of like I needed to talk to someone,
Yes.
and we talked for a few hours.
2.5 hours to be exact. At 1 a.m.
Yeah, and
That's how much we needed to lean on each other after this god awful piece of shit movie.
my brother leaned over to me 40 minutes in. He's like, so this hasn't been good so far, but is it just me or is it getting worse? And I was like, you're completely right.
I will say for me it started with the opening crawl, and I saw
The dead speak.
the dead speak, and
I
I'm like,
laughed.
well, I went, okay, where's this going? And then I read, Emperor Palpatine has sent out a message to the galaxy, and I went, huh? I literally audibly went,
Yeah.
what? And my friend next to me went, yeah. And it just proceeded from there, and literally the people on either side of me fell asleep and were snoring through the movie. And a good summary of the movie is at the end of it, the theater was in dead silence, and you hear someone go, try and start an applause, met with nothing, just glares, and then immediately after those two, done.
Oh, at the end of the movie when it was like wrapping up and Rey's walking into the sun,
I saw like 4 people off to
Yeah.
the left, like get up and start just leaving because
Yeah.
like they're like, yeah, the movie's wrapping up. Time to... No one was like waiting and like
Yeah.
And then I think back on the audiences of when I saw Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and just like when the da 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 da
Mhm.
that part starts, everyone's just cheering
Yeah.
and applauding. Last
Even if
Jedi,
I hated the movie, they were going, woo! And I'm like, okay, I'll join in
everyone
with
was
the clap.
hyped, and then the 9th one starts. This was opening night, and no one cared. Not a single person.
I have to say, when I was in the theater watching this, like watching The Force Awakens, there like the audience reactions were mixed.
Mhm.
Watching The Last Jedi, everybody in my theater absolutely like loved it. They were cheering everywhere they should have been cheering, like all that.
People cheered a
Yeah.
lot in Last Jedi.
And watching-
Especially when they freed the horses, not the...
Yeah, everybody was so
Woo!
fuck the kids.
And I was in the audience.
Sticking to those good Russian values.
And I was in Oleg's audience with my
Get in
cigar,
those labor camps.
laughing.
Horses are a resource. Humans are expendable.
That's actually the tagline of the movie in Russian.
Ship them to the gulags.
but yeah, in watching The Rise of Skywalker, by the end of it, people were like laughing more than at a comedy. Like the kiss at the end, the whole theater just went. "Ah!"
See, my
I
theater...
heard some groans and
Yeah,
one
no.
person go, woo!
No, my theater was dead
Go
silent
get 'em,
except
Tiger.
for people going, oh.
Yeah.
Like groans of pain, of agony.
I'm gonna straight up
"No."
forego my intro statement because like I really just don't like this movie.
It goes without saying.
Yeah.
I got nothing to say. I fucking hate this. That's it.
Yep.
It made
I already
the
made
Revenge
my
of the
intro
Sith
statement.
look like a very good movie.
Well, I
This
mean,
is- I think
by,
we can-
yeah.
We can agree on this. I think this is the worst concluding chapter to any of the trilogies.
I think it is the worst chapter to any of the trilogies.
I still think like Attack of the Clowns is like
and
worse.
Phantom Menace.
I
Not
agree with
possibly,
that.
because those were boring.
Yeah,
That's
you know,
true.
it's like
That
both
is fair.
movies have pretty much no writing,
Yeah.
but Rise of Skywalker at least is technically decent in some
I
aspects.
think
there
in
is
fa-
actually
yeah.
direction.
In
It's-
fairness to Rise of Skywalker, I remember each scene in vivid, excruciating detail, almost as if in a PTSD flashback. I go, ah, ah.
Yeah, but okay, Attack of the Clones
Yeah.
is a dinosaur of its own, which we're not gonna fucking.
Andrew's intro statement.
My interest. Okay. I'm gonna forego my intro statement in favor of describing an experience I had. It's during the
This is
scene
the
where,
lazy one.
yeah. So I saw with one of my best friends. He's not big into movies, but we sat and there was a scene where Rey lands and is having a conversation with Luke, and Luke starts to blatantly fan service raise the X-wing out of the water, and my jaw like dropped in like shock at how horrible this whole scene was, and she looked at me and started laughing hysterically, and then I started laughing hysterically,
and then it just spread from us in the middle of the theater until the entire theater was laughing at what was going on screen. And that was easily the best part of the film.
I described, after seeing the movie, I sent a text to Einish and Oleg
Oh yeah.
saying, I think they should have named this movie Episode 9, JJ Responds to Reddit. Because it felt like 90% of the
It is
scenes
Reddit the movie.
were put in.
It said written and directed by J.J. Abrams. I think they just had a typo. It should have said Reddit.
Yeah, like
Written by Reddit, directed
the odds
by
were a
J.J.
million
Abrams.
to one on the holdover maneuver, and they're like, oh, okay. A Jedi, you should treat a Jedi's weapon with more respect. Giving the helmet back, everything Raylo.
Yeah, no, that was so
Oh,
silly. So
oh.
he patches his helmet back together just to never fucking wear it again. But we gotta
He
sell
wears
the
it for
toys.
2
Yeah,
scenes.
we gotta sell the fucking toys.
And everybody going, wait, so they got rid of Snoke, so he's not going to be the next Palpatine? And JJ goes, oh, they want a new Palpatine.
Yeah.
And the criticism of, oh, they just keep doing the Death Star over again. And he says, fine, I won't do a Death Star. I'll do several.
I'll do a Death Planet.
No.
I'll
Not
do-
Death
I'll
Ship,
do-
'cause that was just another one. I should do Death
I'll do a
Ships.
slightly
Death
less
ships.
impressive death ship.
Planet of Death.
You know,
ships.
They are called Star Destroyers.
It's a real shame.
the stars.
It's a real shame that they never gave the Star Destroyers windows, or else they would be able to know which way was up. That was why they said they couldn't maneuver off the planet, because they didn't know which way was up. I'll give you a hint. Glass of water. Go.
Wait, actually, that's the reason?
Yeah, they said that's why they need the radar dish.
Oh, yeah,
is
at
because
this
they
point, I
needed
was
it
at
to
this
tell
point I was
them which
rubbing
way
the
is
sides
up.
of my head, and I'm like, oh.
Which, by the way, if they can switch that radar thing to any of the starships, why not just have all of the starships transmitting that signal
That
so
is-
that
yeah.
if one of them goes down, it'd be like, well, luckily we've got the rest of the fucking fleet. Why did they build them underground to rise them through the crust? Surely that would do. Why not just build them on the surface? Because the planet, you need a fucking special holocron tracker to find it anyway.
Because it
I,
looked fucking cool.
Oh, yeah,
Why did he raise them with the Force?
Also, how did he build these? I don't know if this is a
dark
nitpick or not,
side
but
of
how
the
did he
Force
build
is a
these?
How did he
pathway
survive?
to
There's
many
so much wrong with
things
this movie.
some consider to
The
be
Death Troopers?
unnatural.
Who were the Death Troopers?
Who were the Sith? Who were the Sith that were in that stadium? They're just
Applauding.
there clapping.
Look,
It's to fill in for the audience who he knew wouldn't.
The First Order and the last.
I am every voice that's been in your head. I feel like I'm hearing his
I am
voices in my
every
head.
voice.
That was a cool idea.
That was actually good.
It's a cool idea executed like
your
someone
head.
shitting down your throat.
No, the
That's why they put it in the TV spot, because it was actually a
In the
decent
TV spot.
scene on its own.
I remember
Yeah.
Oleg texted me, and he was like, "This is kind of actually a cool idea."
You know what's a real shame though is
Yeah,
that
I was confused about Snoke, but then they were like, "Oh no, Palpatine
Since
literally fucking grew Snoke in a bottle."
Yeah.
So
since
Yeah, it's like he had snow.
That was actually kind of
since
neat.
the
I
Force
kinda
Ghosts
like
can
that
now
idea.
come up whenever they want and
Palpatine
can
is
interact
some
with the
people
world.
make pickles homemade.
It's a real shame that Force Ghost Anakin never came up and said, "Hey, by the way, Palpatine's alive." In the 50 years since the last one, he forgot to mention.
I love how.
Oh yeah. By the way, there's a whole Sith planet. And the Emperor's got a special room in his throne room that has a secret holocron that leads to his secret base.
All right, so there's so many things in the
It's
just like
awful.
last point on this. There's so many things in the EU that they could have gone with, and they chose Emperor Palpatine survived and made an entire planet of himself.
Well,
that is the EU.
Let's
you
not
go with.
forget what's her name? What's your Kathleen Kennedy? Let's
Yeah.
not forget Kathleen
Sorry,
Kennedy
Kathleen.
saying it.
you
Star
you
Wars.
have me a little on
when
the
they said-
confused.
Kathleen Kennedy goes, well, guys, you have to remember, this is why Star Wars isn't doing as well as Marvel. It's because Marvel has a lot of source material to draw on, whereas Star Wars has nothing.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
We're completely on our own here.
They're on something.
Yeah, that's not alone.
Hey, they use the EU. They need toilet paper.
And I will say, I do have this criticism of the movie too. It's going to be unpopular, but I found Leia's performance to just be so lifeless.
You said you were gonna say that.
No, that's not even funny.
Maybe a little bit, but
Yeah, I guess I felt like a chuckle, like very deep in my diaphragm.
okay. Actually, because of time reasons, I think we're very much done with intro statements.
Yeah.
Let's just head into the challenge then.
Yeah,
Who wants to
what's
do
I
the
have
challenge?
I have 3 things I just want to say.
It has to be
They're
like you can
they're
voice
short.
them, but like your like at first, just you can say what you think also needs
No, he's
changing.
not allowed.
But for now, just like one change
Yeah,
to
what's
change
your
the
one
most
change?
in the movie.
Okay,
just
fine. Okay.
For fun's sake.
I honestly think removing Palpatine would be my change, just because if you don't have Palpatine, Kylo Ren will be the antagonist, and the ending will not just be a blatant ripoff of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Because you won't have Palpatine going shooting lightning at all the ships. You don't have any of the. you remove Palpatine. That also means that kind of like makes it so that Rey can't really be a Palpatine, because I don't feel like they would out of nowhere just be like, oh yeah, you're a Palpatine, without Palpatine being in the movie. So I feel like, yeah, removing Palpatine would be my big thing that would fix a couple major problems. So.
Okay, sure, I'll go. Okay, so I did my best not to cheat.
I'm hoping ours aren't the same.
No, mine is very close to what Einish did.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to not to cheat, because mine kind of encompasses different changes. They do amount to sort of the same thing, but the way I looked at it was like, what are the most egregious things in The Rise of Skywalker? Like, foregoing the movie structure and all that. It's Kylo Ren's redemption, Palpatine's presence, and Rey's parentage. Those 3. And I was like, how could I like get the most out of this movie while keeping the story structure, while keeping the things that change in order, but try to tweak those 3 things the most? And I think the best way to do it is to, like, since you already have Palpatine in the movie and the whole plot structure is like already built around him, I think you can't not have him in the movie. I think he should be made a Sith holocron, and I will explain what exactly I mean by this. It is not going to be revealed to the audience.
Well, would you have to get a dagger to find him?
No. I mean, technically, I guess yes, because I can only do one change. So, like...
So can you add, like, a couple more daggers so they find a dagger to get to another dagger to get to another?
Yeah, no, by the way...
My one change is
off
you would see
topic.
child slaves
Yeah,
in the
off
background.
topic.
Every scene.
So, the remains of the Death Star have been there for, like, 30 years.
Well, luckily it's never shifted.
No, they have been there for 30 years, and in those 30 years, there is an ancient Sith artifact that is supposed to show you a way through a ruin that's been there for like 35
Also,
years.
what ruins? Did you not see episode 6?
Yeah, it exploded in
There's
space.
a-
Did you not see episode 6? What Palpatine? Fuck the Death Star. How did Palpatine survive? I can better expect
Honestly, no, I-
pieces of the ship to
quote,
exist
quote, he
than
survived,
Palpatine.
quote, he survived somehow.
Oh, no, it was,
kill you.
It was
I have
literally,
been dead before.
it was literally a meme because it was like the dark side of the Force is a pathway many believe blah 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 unnatural, and I'm like, this is a meme.
They
This is
used
what-
a
this-
meme from the prequels.
This
yes.
would be on r/sequel memes.
Yeah.
This is not supposed to be in my Star Wars
Okay,
movie.
so yeah, back to it.
Yeah.
I think Palpatine in my version should be a Sith holocron, where since the Resistance is fighting against him, the audience and the good guys are not gonna actually know that he is a Sith holocron, and it's when Rey finally makes it there, she can learn, and it was all a ruse, and it is actually Kylo Ren who's gonna be the antagonist of the movie, because at that point you gotta have something. And Rey's parentage at this point, because like I already used the change, will have to stay the same. But at the same time, I think it's gonna work much better if Palpatine himself is not in the movie, and it's just something at the end she has it's a final like nail in the coffin before the final confrontation with Kylo Ren, where her like values and her allegiance to the light side will finally be tested.
The strange thing too is that they already had something in canon, unfortunately from the new Battlefront 2. Unfortunately, but it would have worked.
Sin was
Yeah, Operation Cinder or whatever, where it's the red dudes where they have basically recorded.
Hey, Sith troopers.
No.
Sith
There's like
troopers.
floating red
no,
dudes.
no, not those ones.
It's got like Palpatine's personality and image like scanned into it somehow.
Are you talking about? Is it like Winter Soldier with the German dude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I am
Palpatine.
Dr. Zola.
Yeah, exactly. But
I mean,
but
that's.
it's Palpatine.
I wanted to make him a holocron because the idea of a
him being a
Palpatine Dr.
physical,
Zola is kind of weird, but
Yeah.
holocron with like his spirit and his voice,
Yeah.
like his dark side essence, is kind of more
They kind of did that.
magical.
Well, I think it would have been interesting more to make him not even have a full presence of like dark side force powers, even. Like you were saying with the holocron is to have him just be the mind of Palpatine trying to manipulate
Well, I would
things.
if I were like once again if I made that piece of shit movie and I wrote it
You'd
like
commit seppuku. I
yeah
assume.
after that I would but like so the movie is just like it was except for the change that I made. I would say like I would just make it so like Palpatine is like a holocron with this like dark side essence inside this planet. There's already like a dark side kind of like nexus, so like it would not I would definitely make it so that like it would be felt. And the final confrontation would not include Palpatine. I would just use it as a red herring to throw the audience off until the
Also-
end. Because I like Ryan Johnson's methods, JJ.
Also, I have to say, like, for a trilogy that has some pretty solid production design, set design, and stuff like that, the Sith planet just sucks.
Oh god, it's
It
so
is-
drab
Yeah,
and
you already have a Sith planet that is called Korriban. Why the fuck do you need Exegol?
Fucking put it on Mustafar or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that planet in the opening is Mustafar.
Oh god,
It's
how did they
supposed to
make
be.
it look uninteresting? No, I'm aware, but how did they make it look so
Actually,
uninteresting?
that was one of the few cool looking planets. in the whole
I just
movie.
like Kylo Ren slicing.
Just put a red
plots.
filter on it.
Like, you know, it at least looked
That
kind of
was
cool
it.
in
Yeah.
slow motion.
Okay,
with the,
let's.
Andrew,
We have two more
what's
people
yours?
who have shit to
Oh,
say.
mine? Okay. Did you make yours or?
Not yet.
Okay, yeah.
I think he wants to
It's
go
fine.
last.
Yes,
That's
you
good.
Make
Yeah.
Porgs the main.
Yeah, so I think the one change that I'd make, and I look at films a lot more technically than a lot of people, so the one change that I would make is just make it fucking longer. This is one of the
I don't think that's a problem I have.
No, see, here-
I was begging for it to end.
Let him speak.
I was too, but let me explain. This is one of the worst edited films I have ever seen.
Yes.
The editing's horrible.
The pacing.
The pacing is like not that consistent, but it's way too frenetic and it's way too fast. You have shots where it's like Rey's like starting to stand up and then they just do a hard cut and she's like running in a completely different location. It's like I don't need to watch someone stand up all the way, but I at least need some coherence here. And I really think that like just making the movie longer, making the shots a little bit longer, not cutting so frenetically, pacing it better would all just it would just make the film a lot smoother, a lot easier to digest. I mean, clearly the idea was to drown the audience in spectacle so they didn't notice what was wrong. That worked for some people. It worked for my housemate very well. Who later, who 2 or 3 weeks later, he did change his views on that.
I'm so sorry. This feels like just ripping into a person.
After a few hours of waterboarding, he eventually came around to see the correct way of life.
Yeah. Well, that would,
Cinematic waterboarding is the best way
After
to
some
describe it.
indoctrination.
yeah. I mean, that would be my
How many
change.
fingers
Just,
am I holding up?
just re-edit it.
5.
There is no spoon.
But actually, interesting point on that. Apparently, JJ had edited it with an extra 30 minutes in it, and then before it got released in theaters, Disney went in and cut all of his stuff out.
Yeah.
Oh, it works
Yeah,
so well
no.
for Justice League.
I mean, granted, I don't think the Snyder cut, if it ever does come out, is going to make it a good movie.
Oh, it'll be more
And I don't think
coherent.
30 minutes would have saved this movie.
It would have made it
But
paced a little
I
bit.
heard he does try to at least explain why Palpatine exists still.
Yeah, and they added more, and
Yeah.
I mean my big thing is that like it just feels like it was hashed to heck, which
Mhm.
makes sense because they cut 3 weeks out of the post production, or
Yeah.
3 months out of post production,
Yeah.
which is way too much.
At the same time, like they did have test screenings, so I'm guessing the stuff that they did cut, they also cut for
I
a
heard the
reason.
test
Yeah.
screenings were like fake or something.
I heard all of them. I heard that people got up and walked out of test.
I heard
screenings.
I heard it was all fake though. Like it was false.
It's possible.
Info. Like
I mean, I would believe it after seeing
Okay,
the movie.
Alex, what did
Okay.
you want to change?
My change is it doesn't. I think it helps resolve the entire trilogy as a change, and the change is in that scene where Palpatine is torturing everybody with the Force lightning up in the sky, which is fucking ridiculous and awful. And he says, to Rey, if you don't join the dark side, I'm going to kill all of your friends. If she says, if her flaw of being too caring and too like naive and trusting comes in and she says, okay, fine, I'll join you, just don't hurt my friends. and then she is set up as the bad guy for another trilogy. So and that saves things because she's been developed thus far as a as a completely unbeatable person. She is the strongest Force user we've ever seen. She is the strongest fighter we've ever seen. Well, maybe not, but we see her as like super strong pilot.
I mean, I do want to say
everything.
like Luke Skywalker basically schooled her in combat.
Yeah, but
is that she like surprisingly pulled a lightsaber in a stick fight.
Fair, but all of her.
That's like playing rock paper scissors gun.
That is the only fight we've ever seen her lose.
That is a fair point.
And she is the strongest Force user at all that we've ever seen.
Because she's a Palpatine. So.
But
I mean,
aside from Palpatine, maybe at the
episode
end.
9, yeah, except for what Palpatine does in also.
But she's literally
episode 9 where it's like what?
She's literally flying in episode 9.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's some Avatar: The Last Airbender like finale shit.
But that solves her being, I think, her being a Mary Sue, throughout the whole thing is she is a Mary Sue. She never loses a fight. Aside from once with Luke during a training sequence to prove she's training, and she has no character faults that we can see. So it saves her from being a total Mary Sue by making her character fault, quote unquote, of being too caring, be used against her and eventually turn her to the dark side. And it makes use of her being made unbeatable thus far, because if she is now the villain and she's been established as unbeatable, then you have another hero come in and have to beat an unbeatable villain.
Okay, I have an issue with this in the sense that, like...
I think that might actually be worse than the cut we got.
Okay, I'm not going to say that. My issue is more like... So if Rey does that, and, like, we do have because, like, if we don't have another trilogy, it's just kind of like a what the fuck ending. Like...
Fair. Fair.
Without the context of another trilogy, it's horrible.
Without the context.
Yeah, if there is another trilogy, I can understand, but at the same time, like...
Or even another movie.
What would keep Rey... Like, how can you, like, going to the dark side is kind of like an ideological commitment. Yes. Like, if she's like if she killed Palpatine and in rage, like, kind of unwillingly embraced those ideals, sure. Mm-hmm. But, like, if she's just like, yeah, fine, sure, I'll go to the dark side. How is that gonna that's not gonna make her evil.
Well, no.
How is that gonna work?
I think that makes it more interesting of if she's not entirely evil, but
like she's not even gonna need redemption. It's
not
even when somebody needs to go and say
basically if you have them set up as.
It just makes no sense.
No, but here, so it's a villain in which they're begrudgingly a villain. It's the idea of Thanos. He's not killing off half the planet because he's evil. He's killing off, or half the universe because he's evil. He's killing off half the universe because he sees it as the only way to save the universe.
But Palpatine, so like what would she do?
Rey,
would she just make an empire? Or?
Essentially, Rey takes up the position that Kylo was in. And Kylo takes up the position Rey was in. They switch roles essentially, and so you've seen someone who has to now redeem themselves in the eyes of everyone. You have someone who has already been beaten several times by the villain, and so he now has. I mean, you could just add on one more movie with that. You don't need another trilogy even. You can you can do so much with that. You can have so many interesting character dynamics of having Rey be evil, but not really evil so much as she's there and helping the dark side of the Force because she has to save her friends.
Yeah, but like later, what I'm saying is like
it's the same thing that
after this battle,
Anakin to fall.
If after this battle, like the battle's over,
Anakin fell because he had like serious
he actually
problems
fell
with
to the dark side. Regardless, like okay, she agrees to be on the dark side with Palpatine. Her friends escape. They're not there in the moment anymore. Why does she have to still be doing this?
The knowledge that at any point Palpatine can use one of his planet-destroying weapons on.
But isn't her role gonna be literally using those herself?
Perhaps against other people, but I think it's more using her as a pawn and like Palpatine really idiotically says, basically setting her up. God, I hate it. To be like his new body. If he's basically grooming her to be a new vessel for him, like
I mean, okay,
the body
it
has to
has
grow accustomed to the
potential,
person. It
like,
has potential.
I'll give
I'm
you
not saying
that.
it's a flawless
No,
concept.
it has potential.
I'm saying it very much is dependent on another movie and that movie being good and delivering on it. So if it was another movie by JJ, it would shit the bed and make it even worse. But I think it sets it up in a way that you can salvage the rest of the horrible shit that's been in the trilogy so far. And that was my goal, was to save that key flaw to the series, which is that Rey has been a complete Mary Sue.
I mean, okay.
Every word of what you just said.
I think she is a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
I
think-
think that.
I'm
I
not
also
sure.
think it's. I also think it's an interesting idea, personally. Like, I don't think it. I think I like it more than Oleg and Ines do. I think the problem really is the idea that you do. I mean, because that is in the classic
Yeah.
Star Wars tradition of, like, George Lucas always wanted the protagonist to become the antagonist.
It's like
That was
poetry. It
That's
rhymes.
always what he wanted. So it would be kind of nice to see it come to fruition. The
Mhm.
problem here is the same problem that
I just feel there's
they
too much
had in the original
inconsistency.
trilogy, is that it doesn't build up to it, and also
Right.
the fact that I would not, like, I don't think I'll ever again trust Disney to deliver
No.
on a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
So
Maybe a spin-off.
Unless Taika
a,
Waititi's
a
in
spin-off,
charge.
a spin-off could be fine, but
Yeah.
a continuation of the Skywalker saga, no.
I hear
They
they're
just
going
let
back
it
to
back.
They
Old
should let it rest. Just focus on like TV shows, spin-offs. If they
I
have
heard,
to.
Because that's
I
the
heard they
thing.
were thinking of like almost retconning this trilogy, is what I heard.
I don't
Well,
think they'll go that
no,
far,
they
but
won't.
There are a
they'll
lot of
ignore it.
people who's like maybe not the Rise of Skywalker, but there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset over that too. Like they should just fucking leave it be.
They
I
just need to
think
let it
I
die.
think they're just going to let
it
it
if
be
they
there,
have to.
and they will never reference it again. They might set stuff far in the future. They might set stuff far in the past, but they will never again reference the events of.
I would be
the-
cool with it.
I'm
Sequel
alright with that
trilogy.
because Mandalorian's been pretty fun.
Yeah.
That's the correct way to
Um,
handle it. I think.
Mandalorian's fine, dialogue sucks, but
Yeah, it's-
I don't think so far. I don't think it's great.
It's not
Yeah.
good, but I mean,
No, it's good.
I mean, okay.
We've
I
only
meant to say,
seen 3 episodes.
it's
4
not
episodes.
great. It's
oh, fuck
decent.
the last episode.
It's decent.
Yeah, that,
and
that last
watchable.
one was not that good.
I don't want to remember.
Yeah,
it.
no.
The one directed by Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yeah, that was awful. Real quick, Oscars are tonight at the time of the filming.
By the way, you should subscribe to our channel because the next podcast that's going to come out in 2 weeks is
Yeah.
going to be about the Oscars, which
Yes.
are happening tonight.
At the time of filming, not the time of release because it's probably
Yeah.
a week after we'll release.
Yeah.
But
You heard it here, folks. I think 1917 is going to win.
I
don't
think
think
you?
I
do.
I do. As
I
well.
think so
I
too.
I
do.
don't. I think that Best Picture is going to be The Irishman. I don't.
Oh, that's yeah. That's,
I would
is-
like.
It's Netflix.
Okay, actually, let
Yeah,
me,
that's
let
why I
me-
don't think it
Let me
is,
say it
'cause
like that.
Netflix-
If you're asking me which of the movies I want to win Best Picture,
Mhm.
it's The Lighthouse. If you ask me which movie in the Best Picture lineup I want to win, I would say 1917 by a small margin. If you ask me what I think is going to win, it's The Irishman. So, The Irishman.
I
Yeah.
think it'll be 1917. It's got a lot of momentum. Sam Mendes has won Best Picture before for
Has
American Beauty in 1999.
Oh wait, that was him.
Yes.
Yeah,
And so
it's his best
Oh,
movie.
I,
They-
well,
they-
no, I love
the
American.
Academy
Beauty.
loves rewarding themselves. They love rewarding technical feats. If nothing else, I think he's a good chance for Best Director. We've seen time and time again this decade.
I think Tarantino
Well,
might get
we've
it.
seen time and time again it going to people like Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, and we've seen it going to
That's a mouthful.
yeah, we've seen it going to Ang Lee for Life of Pi, Alfonso
That's
Cuarón for
awful.
Gravity. I mean, you're seeing
God.
you're seeing it go to movies that are technical feats. So I think if nothing else, he's got a really good shot as
Well, it
Best
was an
Director.
amazing movie.
I think 1917 is guaranteed to get Best Cinematography.
Oh, yeah, that was
for
an
sure.
easy one.
That is a gift.
That's
Which is the
it-
only
it should have
category
been-
the Lighthouse
it
was
should have
fucking
been
put
like-
in.
Wait, was it actually?
Yeah, it was the
Yeah,
Lighthouse.
only.
The only category
Okay.
the Lighthouse is in is Best Cinematography.
it
I'm
should-
like,
it should get
Cinematography,
that.
those people are really the people who nominate best cinematography are the ones who like consistently impress me. Like last
Yeah.
year, were there 2 or 3 foreign language films nominated for best cinematography?
I think
Like,
there were 3.
I think there were 3. Yeah,
And it's like,
I don't know, I
Best
couldn't understand
cinematography,
them.
like those people like really
what it
like
means
do a
is
good
it's
job.
fine.
It's all
Meanwhile,
great to
meanwhile,
me.
sound mixing and sound editing just doesn't know what the hell the difference is. There's like,
I know what the difference is.
Yeah, there's
and I
like-
appreciate.
there's-
I
do
feel
they
like
know?
I feel like I appreciate the difference between sound editing
Like,
and sound mixing
they
more than
don't
the
know
Academy.
it. They don't know it because they just give it to the same film when there is a difference between how you mix a movie and edit it.
Yes,
JJ's
exactly.
like, oh, so wait, sound mixing. That's like when I put all the sounds of the movie into a blender and then I press mix.
That's pretty
Right?
much what it was. It was bad in Rise of Skywalker.
Which is weird.
I am on a voice.
The sound was really good in episode 7 and 8.
All right.
Like,
Yeah.
As
But
set up
so,
for
yeah.
next time, also hit us up with your favorite movie of the year. Just one.
Yeah.
movie.
I also one important thing is Chewie finally got his medal.
Fuck
Uh,
that. Let's do the Oscars.
finally.
Let's do the Oscars.
Yeah, my Oscar pick is 1917, and I
Wait.
think it should win.
Okay. Anish, you said 1917 for the win. Who deserves it?
I think Parasite deserves it easily out of this lineup.
Okay.
I'm with Einish. Absolutely Parasite.
Okay.
But
I
I
haven't
think
seen it yet.
I think 1917 will probably win.
I will before the next podcast, but I haven't seen Parasite yet.
I think The Lighthouse, 1917, The Irishman. Here we go.
All right.
Cool.